460 Srimad-Bhagavad-gita Chapter 4 Yoga Maya, the divine potency, these two pertaining to his power, and the sixth one, is his manifestation. Ajapai-san-avyatmas, the Lord, by this expression, explains that, unlike common men, he is without birth and death. People take birth and die, but he, in spite of being birthless, manifests himself, and in spite of being imperishable, conceals himself. Both manifestation and concealment are his unearthly sport, pastimes. All beings were unmanifest before birth, and will be unmanifest after death. These are manifest only in the middle, Gita 2:28, while the Lord ever remains revealed like the sun, as the sun, before rising and after setting, remains the same, but it is not seen by all the beings all the time. So is the case with God, who ever remains revealed, but seems to be manifested and concealed. Other beings have to take birth under the subordination of nature, prakriti, according to the actions of the past, while God manifests himself of his own accord. Beings take birth, grow, become old and die. Moreover, they have to ride or go pleasure and pain. But that is not so in the case of God. He does not undergo any change. He incarnates himself as Lord Rama or Krishna, etc., displays his sports as a child and an adolescent, and then continues to be an adolescent with a healthy and handsome body, without undergoing any change for hundreds of years. Therefore, picture of God are prepared without a beard and mustache. If a modern artist shows them, that is something different. Thus, unlike other men, God is neither born, nor does he undergo any modifications, nor does he die. Bhutanam Shvrapalsan, in spite of being the only Lord, great Lord, of all beings, God becomes a child when he incarnates himself. But even then, he possesses his lordly nature, as Lord Krishna killed an ogress named Putana, of a very huge and horrible body, when he was only 6 days old. He killed the demons Asakata, Trinavarta and Dalga respectively, when he was 3 months old, 1 year old and 5 years old respectively. Thus, in his childhood, he killed several demons. He raised the Govardhana mountain, on the tip of his finger, when he was only 7 years old. In spite of being the Lord of all beings, when he manifests himself, he does not hesitate even to perform the most menial job. This is his divine superiority. He works as a chariot driver of Arjuna, and obeys him, yet his lordliness over Arjuna and other beings remains intact. That is why, in spite of being a charioteer, he preaches him the gospel of the Gita. Lord Rama carries out the order of his father, Dasaratha, and goes into exile for 14 years, yet his lordliness over Dasaratha and other beings has not suffered in the least. Prakritim Svamadhisthya, the Lord's pure nature, Prakriti, is different from the three modes of nature of goodness, of passion and of ignorance. This pure nature is his divine potency, transcendental power, or delighting power. It is the embodiment of truth, consciousness and bliss. It is also called the sentient power or power of grace. The same divine or transcendental power is known as Sri Radha or Sri Sita. It is also called devotion or the supreme knowledge, by which God is attained. Prakriti, nature, is the Lord's power, which is neither different from God nor is one with him. For example, fire has two kinds of power, of lighting and burning. The first removes darkness as well as fear, while the latter is used for cooking and heating purposes. But both these powers are neither different from fire, as these are nothing but fire, nor are they one with fire, because they can be subdued by sacred formulas, and herbs etc. As the lighting and the burning powers of fire remain innate, the Lord manifests himself with his pure nature, prakriti, i.e., his transcendental power which works for him. Sri Radha is his divine power, and she has several female friends who are the embodiments of devotion, and they bestow devotion upon his devotees. A person devoid of devotion can't know them. A devotee can know them only by the grace of Lord Krishna and Sri Radha. In a matchbox, so does God's power remain unexposed even though he pervades everywhere, all the time, in all things and persons etc. The Lord manifests himself by keeping his nature, prakriti, under control. As fire is not seen until it is revealed with its lighting and burning power, so is the Lord not beheld until he manifests himself with his transcendental power, even though he pervades everywhere all the time. Sri Radha, Sri Sita and Sri Rukmini etc. are the Lord's own divine powers. He pervades everywhere universally, yet he does not perform any activity. Whatever he does with his divine power. The drama that he stages with his divine power is so wonderful and uncommon, that human beings, having heard, sung and recollected it, are sanctified and they attain salvation. The same divine power, in the case of devotees, who are the worshippers of the attribute-less aspect of the Absolute, becomes the supreme knowledge of Brahma, while for devotees who worship the Lord endowed with attributes, that power becomes devotion. When a devotee has an exclusive devotion for God, his divine power is revealed in him, in the form of his devotion. This devotion is so singular, that it attracts God, and he, in spite of being formless, has to reveal himself, endowed with that form. This devotion is also bestowed upon devotees by him. The divine power of God, in the form of devotion, is perceived in two ways: disunion and union. It is by God's grace that there is disunion of a devotee from God, because in that state, he becomes so much restless to meet him, that his attachment to the world is totally renounced and God manifests himself. In the discipline of knowledge, the divine power of God is revealed in the form of keen desire to know. This keen curiosity to know compels the striver to know the real essence. Then, in the form of the supreme knowledge of Brahma, it roots out ignorance and illumines the real self. But the divine power of disunion is more powerful even than this. Where is God? What should I do to attain him? Where should I go? When the devotee becomes restless to attain him, his restlessness roots out all his sins, and reveals him to him. This restlessness is a better means of God realization than knowledge, wisdom or discrimination. A special fact: the Lord manifests himself by keeping his nature, prakriti, under control, and stages the drama of human life. As fire by itself does nothing, its lighting power provides light and its burning power burns things, so the Lord does nothing, but it is his divine power which does everything. In the scripture Sita declares, "It is I who killed Ravana and other demons, while Lord Rama did nothing." Like man and his power, God and his power are neither different from each other, nor are one. God cannot separate his power from him, so it is not different from him. A man remains the same, but his power changes, so it is not identical with him. Therefore, philosophers have called it neither different nor one. This power is indescribable. The devotees of Lord Krishna call it power as Sriji, Radhaji. As a male and a female are two distinct entities, that way Lord Krishna and Radhaji are not two. Lord Krishna and his power, Radhaji, in the discipline of knowledge become one, while, in the discipline of devotion become two. Lord Krishna and Radhaji become two, so that they may stage the drama of human life, in order to exchange love and thrill the devotees with delight. When they become two, it is difficult to judge who is superior, and who the lover and who the beloved. Both of them appear. Lord Krishna and Radha are the oceans of savor. They are one, but they have become two in order to stage the drama of human life. Sri Radhitopanirpanasad, uncommon and unique, and they are attracted towards each other. They are pleased by seeing each other. Their pastime of love for each other is enhanced. This is called rasa, sport. The Lord's powers are infinite and limitless. His powers can be classified into two groups, pertaining to glory and those pertaining to sweetness or love. By his majestic power, he does wonderful sports and feats, which none else can do. By this very power, we find in him excellence, eminence, singularity and divinity, which are neither heard nor seen anywhere else. While he exercises his sweet power, he himself is overwhelmed, and forgets that he is Lord. When he manifests himself in a sweet mood, he appears to be very sweet and loving. He plays with cowherds like an ordinary cowherd. Similarly, he plays the role of a friend, a son and a husband, and so on, in the drama of life. Thus he thrills his devotees with delight, with his sweetness and love, by not disclosing his glory and grandeur. The Lord reveals one of his powers at a time, either that of glory or that of sweetness. When any doubt arises in the sentiment of sweetness, his power or glory is revealed. Lord Krishna, as a cowherd, searches for calves. But, when doubt arises about their whereabout, his power is revealed, and he immediately comes to know that the cows have been taken away by Brahma, the Creator. The Lord is also the handsomest, so every being is naturally attracted towards him. Seeing his beauty, The women of Mathura say to each other, Lord Krishna is the quintessence of handsomeness. No one can compete with him in the entire universe. He is handsome, even without any outward makeup or ornamentation. No one is ever satisfied by seeing his countenance, because his charm ever remains fresh. All kinds of fame, beauty and glory depend upon his handsome appearance. It is very rare to behold him. What penances the cowherdesses must have performed so that they ever beheld his sweet countenance. Srimad 1044-14. Sri Sukadvaji says, O Pariksit, all the citizens of Mathura and other people of the country, who were sitting on the dais, having seen Lord Krishna and Balrama, were so much pleased that their eyes and faces were glowing and filled with curiosity. They were not satisfied by looking at their handsome faces through their eyes, and it seemed as if they were imbibing them with their eyes, licking them with their tongues, smelling them with their noses, and embracing them to their chests. Srimad 1043-120-21. Having seen the beauty of Lord Rama, King Janaka was filled with joy and declared that his dispassionate mind, having seen the sweet and handsome face of Lord Rama, was so much enamored as a kakaro, the Indian red-legged partridge, is, by the moon. Manasa 1-216-2. Even the wild tribes, such as Kola and Balagat, enamored of Lord Rama's countenance. They salute Lord Rama, offer their presents to him, behold him, with great affection. They are so much enamored of him that they remain standing there just like statues. Their bodies are thrilled and their eyes are flooded with tears of love. Manasa 2-135-3. Not to talk of the Lord's devotees, even demons, such as Karadusana, who have enmity with Lord Rama, are wonderstruck with his charm. So they say, out of all the snakes, demons, gods, men and ascetics, whom we have seen, conquered and killed throughout our life, we have never seen such beauty. Manasa 3:19-12. The Lord does not reveal himself to those who have a disinclination for him, and he appears to them as a common man. He stages a drama of his human life by keeping his divine potency concealed. Srimad Bhagavata 10:29-1. A devotee comes to know God, while a non-believer does not know him. The more a devotee is inclined towards him, the more he reveals himself to him. Deluded people cannot know him, because of their delusion and because of the divine potency of the Lord. Gita 7:25. They cannot understand the infinitude of God, even when he manifests himself before them, just as he manifested himself in the form of Draupadi's unending sari. Yet because of their delusion, Dusasena, Duryodhana and Kama etc., could not know his manifestation. If a person gets rid of his delusion, he can realize the self or God, but cannot behold him. One can have a vision of the Lord only when he unveils himself, by removing the veil of his divine potency. A man middle can get rid of this own delusion, but it is beyond his power to do away with God's divine potency. If a person takes refuge in him, he removes his delusion and also helps him to behold him. The different plays that the Lord stages are accomplished with the help of his divine potency. So people can see those plays and enjoy these. If staged without the help of divine potency, no one can either see these or relish these. An important fact pertaining to incarnation: the term avitra means descend, one who has descended. The all-pervading Lord, who is truth, consciousness, and bliss, by his special grace, manifests himself as a common being. His peculiarity lies in being small, in spite of being supreme, while it is otherwise with common men. It is his peculiarity that he, in spite of being boundless, becomes very small. Though it is not a rule that having realized the self, a devotee may behold God, but having beheld God, he realizes the self. So Lord Rama in the Ramakairoda Manasa declares, the wonderful reward of my vision is that man easily realizes the self. 336-5. Upholds infinite universes, yet he is known as Giridhari, because he lifted a mountain, Govardhana. It is nothing surprising in his case, as in each of whose pores infinite universes exist, to uphold a mountain. But it is his peculiarity, in upholding it, as well as in manifesting himself as a common man. He plays his part in the drama of human life as a common innocent boy. While playing, he was defeated by other cowherds. Consequently, he had to carry the victor on his back. The wise remain absorbed in the self, but his devotees relish his pastimes. Even Brahma, the leader of the wise, was wonderstruck by beholding his pastimes, and so are the great saints and ascetics who cannot understand the secret of his play and remain dumbfounded. The Lord by his grace, enables those devotees, who are exclusively devoted to him, to know the secret of his pastimes. Manasa 2:127. 2. Lord Krishna, while grazing cows, kills huge-bodied demons, in no time. Despite being a boy, his lordliness remains the same as usual. As a learned teacher, utters the letters A, B, C, etc., while teaching the alphabet to a boy by descending to the boy's standard, so does the Lord of infinite universes preach the gospel to us, by becoming one of us. His wonderful and unearthly pastimes lead people to salvation, whether they listen to them, study or sing them. Appendix: the Lord carries on his pastime with the help of Prakriti, therefore Saitaji declares, I have performed all the deeds, Lord Rama has done nothing. Adhyatma Ramayana, Balaka 132:43. But like the man, the Lord is not subordinated to Prakriti Prakritim Tvamadisthya. The reason is that for the Lord Prakriti is not different from him but is identical with him. Gita 7:4-5. The Lord has to manifest himself before the man who is seated in Prakriti, therefore he reveals himself by subordinating his Prakriti, nature. Then only men can behold him. Middle. In the next verse, the Lord reveals the occasion of his manifestation. Whenever there is a decline in righteousness and an upsurge in unrighteousness, 0 Arjuna, I then manifest myself. 7 Comment: when righteous, innocent, weak, pious and spiritual people are exploited by unrighteous, cruel, strong, wicked and mundane people, and when moral values are lost and immorality prevails, that state is the state of a decline of righteousness, an upsurge of unrighteousness. The terms yada yada, whenever, show that God manifests himself, whenever there is need for his manifestation. Example: when the seas were churned, God in the form of unconquered Lord Vishnu, churned the seas as a divine tortoise, held Mandarikula, mountain, pressed it hard, as a being with 1,000 arms, and as a bewitching woman distributed the nectar among the gods. Thus, God manifested himself, in different forms, at the same time. The root of the decline of righteousness and the rise of unrighteousness is its attraction towards the perishable. As the body of a child is inherited from the parents' bodies, so is the universe created by nature, Prakriti, and God. Out of these, nature and its evolute, the world ever undergo modifications, while God and his fragment, the soul, ever remain uniform, without the least modification. When a man has a desire to derive pleasure out of mundane objects, he starts having a fall. The more he is attached to worldly pleasures and prosperity, the more increase there is in unrighteousness. The more this unrighteousness rises, the more vices, such as sins, strifes and riots etc., prevail in the society. There is a decline of righteousness through the Satya age, Treta, Dvapara and Kali ages, respectively. In the Satya age righteousness flourishes. In Treta, the decline begins. In Dvapara there is a rapid decline, and in Kali age, unrighteousness prevails. Then, God manifests himself, for the establishment of righteousness. Tadatmanam the Srajamihim. Whenever there is a decline of righteousness and rise of unrighteousness, then the Lord manifests himself for the destruction of unrighteousness and for the establishment of righteousness. When there is a decline of righteousness and increase in unrighteousness, people are inclined to unrighteousness, which leads them to a downfall. The Lord is the disinterested friend of all beings, so he manifests himself in order to check their fall. When actions are performed with a selfish motive, i.e., for reward, there is a decline of righteousness, and when a man, having deviated from his duty, performs forbidden action, there is rise of unrighteousness. It is desire, which is the root of all unrighteousness, sins and injustice etc. Gita 3:37. Therefore, God manifests himself, in order to root out this desire and propagate the principle of the performance of actions, without expectation of any reward. Here, a doubt may arise why at the present, in the wretched Kali age, God does not manifest himself, when there is such a decline of righteousness and rise of unrighteousness. The clarification is, that the time is not yet ripe. During the Treta age, the demons, having killed many sages, piled up their bones. But, at present righteous persons are leading a pious and peaceful life, and nobody kills them. Secondly, when there is decline of righteousness and rise of unrighteousness, by God's direction saints come to earth or true strivers reveal themselves. These establish righteousness. Sometimes, the liberated souls living in divine abode also come to earth, to help the people to attain salvation, as representatives of God. Where there are such strivers and saints, there is neither so much decline of righteousness, nor so much increase in unrighteousness, as at other places where there are neither strivers nor saints. When people do not follow the teachings of strivers and saints, but start to kill them, and when there are left only a few righteous persons to propagate righteousness, and there is a decline in righteousness, then God manifests himself. Link having described the occasion of his manifestation in the preceding verse, the Lord now reveals the aim of his manifestation in the next verse. For the protection of the good as for the destruction of the wicked as for the establishment of righteousness, I manifest myself from age to age. 8. Comment: God manifests himself in order to protect the good, because they destroy unrighteousness and propagate righteousness. The term, sadhunim, of sadhus, has been used for those good men, who naturally are inclined towards the good of others, who remember and chant the name, and think of form, qualities, glories and pastimes etc., of God, who propagate these among people and who depend on God. He, whose only aim is God realization, is a good person, sage, while one who hankers after worldly pleasures and prosperity, is not a good person. When a man attaches importance to the perishable world, desires are born. As desires increase, goodness disappears. But when desires are renounced, goodness appears. Because desire is the root of evil, goodness leads to salvation of oneself and to the welfare of others. Good people are even engrossed in the good of beasts, birds, trees, mountains, men, gods, manes and sages etc., through their thoughts and deeds. In the Ramakirodamanasa the citizens of Ayodhya say to Lord Rama, "Zero foe of demons, in the world there are only two, who do good to others, without any selfish motive. They are, you and your devotees." 747-3. If people come to know the thoughts and feelings of these sadhus, they will ever bow to them. But if they know the thoughts and feelings of the wicked, there would be quarrels and strifes. Here, a doubt may arise: why are such people seen suffering, when God protects them? The clarification is, that the Lord protects their good feelings, rather than their bodies, riches, honor and fame etc. The reason is, that those good people do not attach importance to the mundane objects, because by doing so, they may turn bad. The Lord also would not attach importance to them. Devotees truly never desire worldly objects. They are happy in unfavorable circumstances, because these lead them to spiritual upliftment. Devotion develops in unfavorable circumstances, because their attachment, which causes their downfall, is renounced. Therefore, the Lord protects the good, by creating unfavorable circumstances for them. Vinasaya duskritam, the wicked propagate unrighteousness and destroy righteousness. So the Lord manifests himself for their destruction. Those who, because of many desires, remain absorbed in vices, such as falsehood, fraud, deception and dishonesty etc. Those who exploit the virtuous and good persons, those who remain engaged in doing evil to others, those who do not know what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, and those who always condemn God and the scriptures, such persons, of demoniac nature, have been called wicked. The Lord manifests himself for the destruction of such wicked persons. Question: the Lord declares that he is the same to all beings and there is none hateful to him. Gita 9:29. Then why does he destroy the wicked? Answer: as the Lord is a disinterested friend of all beings, no one is hateful to him. But he who is an enemy of his devotees, is also his enemy. In the Ramakirodamanasa, it is said, he who offends a devotee of Lord Rama, has to burn in the Lord's fire of anger. 218-3. God is called a devotee of his devotees. Srimad Bhagavata 1086-59. So the wicked, who offend his devotees, are destroyed by him. Devotees destroy sins while God destroys sinners. As his grace is revealed in protecting the good, so is his grace revealed in destroying the wicked, as he does evil to none. 183-3. Moreover, he purifies them by destroying them. Saints also establish righteousness, but they do not destroy the wicked. Destruction of the wicked is brought about by the Lord in the same way, as a simple injury may be dressed by a compounder but a major operation is performed only by a civil surgeon. Both the parents are equally interested in the welfare of their son. When the son does not pay attention to his studies, and indulges in mischief, both of them want to set him right. The father beats him, so that he may give up his bad habit. The mother checks the father from beating him. Being faithful, it is her duty to follow her husband's footsteps. So should she also start beating the boy, because she is faithful? No, it is her duty to protect the boy, otherwise he may receive a severe beating. The father also does not want to give him a good beating, but he wants the son to get rid of his bad habit. Similarly, God is like a father, while saints are like a mother. First, the Lord and saints urge people to give up their wickedness, but when they do not mend their ways, God has to manifest himself for their destruction. If they give up their wickedness, there is no need to destroy them. The attribute absolute is not antagonistic to nature, illusion and ignorance. It rather gives existence, inspires and nourishes these. God, whether he is attributeless or is endowed with attributes, fosters all beings, equally without any distinction. Even the earth, created by him, provides room equally to everyone, whether he is virtuous or wicked. Similarly, all of them are equally provided with the necessities of life, such as food, water, air and sunlight. Thus the Lord is an ocean of generosity and equanimity, even to the vilest person. If a person just thinks of his generosity, he gets thrilled with delight and starts bowing to him. The Lord is not opposed to a wicked person, but he is opposed to their wicked actions, as those actions are injurious to the world, as well as to them. The Lord is a disinterested friend of all beings. Therefore, he destroys the wicked, in order to do good to the world, as well as to those wicked persons. How generous he is, that having killed those wicked persons he sends them to his own abode. Now a question may arise, whether the Lord himself will have to come to kill us, if we go on committing sins. If it is as so, we shall attain salvation easily, otherwise we shall have to control our senses, mind etc., and inculcate virtues and practice spiritual discipline. The answer is, that the Lord destroys only those wicked who cannot be destroyed by anyone else. Secondly, performance of good actions will lead us to virtues, which would pave the way to our salvation. But if we are killed by anyone else, or die a natural death while performing sinful actions, what will be the consequences? How would our desire of being killed by the Lord be fulfilled? Therefore, sinful actions should not be performed at all. Establishment of righteousness consists in preaching and propagating the selfless performance of actions. Unrighteousness propagates, due to the performance of action with a selfish motive and due to the attachment to the unreal. Therefore, the Lord manifests himself, in order to propagate the performance of selfless actions, through his deeds. When this feeling is propagated, righteousness is naturally established. The Lord is the abode of righteousness. Gita 14:27. So he manifests himself, in order to establish righteousness well. In fact, righteousness never perishes, it only declines. Whenever there is a decline of righteousness, the Lord re-establishes it. Gita 4:13. Sambhavami the Lord manifests himself, from age to age. He also descends to the mortal world, several times in the same age, according to the need of the hour. He incarnates himself as Karaka Purusas, as well as saints. The incarnations of the Lord and his Karaka Purusas, representatives, are casual or occasional, while saints are regularly born. Now, a doubt may arise, whether the omnipotent Lord cannot protect the good, destroy the wicked, and establish righteousness without manifesting himself. The clarification is, that he can do wonders without his manifestation also and go on doing so, yet he manifests himself in order to shower his special grace on beings, for their welfare. During his incarnation, his vision, the Lord manifests himself as a human being in order to shower his special grace on beings, and he stages the drama of human life in such a manner that it conduces them to be devoted to him. Manasa 1:192. Touch, talk etc., and later on, the practice of hearing, thinking, chanting and following his sport, lead people to salvation. The Lord comes to the mortal world in different incarnations, according to the need of the times. He remains perfect during all the incarnations, though there is nothing that should be done by him, nor is there anything unattained that should be attained. Gita 3:22, yet he performs all actions by manifesting himself, from time to time, only for the welfare of the world. Therefore, human beings should also perform their duty, for the welfare of others. In response to Arjuna's question which he put in the 4th verse, the Lord explains the 3 main differences between men's births and his births. Manifestations. 1. Difference in knowledge. Many births of men, as well as of the Lord, have taken place. Men do not know them all, only the Lord knows. 2. Difference. Ill birth. Men have to take birth, under the subordination of nature, prakriti, in order to reap the fruits of their virtuous and evil actions, and then to realize God. God manifests himself of his own accord, governing his nature, prakriti, through his divine potency. 4:6. 3. Difference in actions. Men perform actions, in order to satisfy their desires, though it is not the aim of human life, while the Lord acts, only in order to enable beings to attain salvation. 417:8. Link. In response to the question put, in the 4th verse, by Arjuna, the Lord started describing the divine character of his birth. Now in the next verse he, of his own accord, explains the merit of knowing the divine character of his birth, as well as actions, in order to explain the performance of actions without expectation of fruit, karmaga. He who thus knows in reality the true nature of my divine birth and action, karma, and he having abandoned the body, is not reborn but he comes to me. 0. Arjuna 9. Comment. Janma karma ca me divyam. The Lord is beyond birth and death, he is birthless and imperishable. His manifestation in human body is not like the birth of common men. He manifests himself of his own accord in order to stage the drama of human life, for the welfare of beings. The form, body, of the Lord, unlike other beings, is not made of flesh and blood. The bodies of beings are full of virtues and vices. They are transitory, sick, mundane, changing, material and are born of ovum and semen, while the form of the Lord is free from virtues and vices. It is eternal, healthy, spiritual, unchanging, divine and is revealed. The bodies of gods are also divine, but the form of the Lord is far superior to those of the gods, and even the gods are ever eager to see this form. Hila 11,152. When the Lord descended on the mortal world, as Lord Rama and Lord Krishna, Mother Kausalya and Devaki, did not give birth to them, first, he revealed to them his 4-armed divine form, with conch, disc, mace and lotus, and then staged the drama of a child. Then the mother requested him to conceal that divine form. The description has been very clearly given in the Ramakaya 11,192, as well as Srimad Bhagavata 10.330 and 10.346. Uddhava tells Lord Krishna, "You were the supreme bond nature, prakriti, and you are Brahma, the very embodiment of knowledge. Even then you have manifested yourself as a human being of your own accord." Srimad Bhagavata 11.11.28. When Lord Rama returned to his abode, he, unlike common men, disappeared from this mortal world along with his body, form. His body was not left on the earth. It is said in the Ramayana by Valmiki, that having heard the words of Brahma, the creator, the very wise Lord Rama, having decided, entered the splendor of Lord Vishnu, with his 3 brothers, in his form. As far as Lord Krishna is concerned, the same fact is mentioned about him in Srimad Bhagavata, that he also went to his abode, in his form. 11.31.6. The same sort of description is available in Ramakaya Manasa, when sage Valmiki says to Lord Rama, that his form is divine and unaltered, only a deserving one knows the reality about him. When he manifests himself as a human being, for protecting saints and gods, and preach and act as a worldly king. Once, sages Sanuka etc., were going to the abode of Lord Vishnu. The gatekeeper would not let them go in and they cursed him. Knowing that his gatekeeper had insulted the sages, Lord Vishnu himself came to the entrance. Having a vision of the Lord, and receiving the divine smell of basil leaves and shoots, while bowing to him, their bodies and hearts were thrilled and excited, though such wise sages ever remain established in the imperishable Lord. Srimad Bhagavata 3.15.43. As the smell of the Lord's lotus feet is divine, his clothes, ornaments and weapons etc., are also divine, sentient and very singular. Having heard, studied and recollected the pastime of the Lord, People's hearts are purified and they get rid of ignorance. This is the divine nature of his actions. Lord Sankara, Brahma, the creator, sages, such as Sanuka etc., divine sage, Narada etc., who are the embodiments of knowledge, having sung and heard of his divine pastime, get absorbed in them. A person who visits the places where the Lord staged the drama of his human life, with reverence and faith and resides there, attains salvation. It means that the Lord manifests himself and carries on his pastimes in order to enable the people to attain salvation. Therefore, people attain their aim by reading, hearing and thinking of his divine pastimes. In the 4th verse, Arjuna put the question to the Lord pertaining to his birth, but here, the Lord starts describing his action of his own accord. By doing so, it seems as if the Lord wants to emphasize the fact that a man's actions can also be divine, though his birth cannot be divine as human life has been bestowed upon him only to perform such actions. Actions are divine, when these are free from desire for reward, attachment and a sense of mine. Divine actions lead to liberation from the bondage of the present as well as past actions, and these naturally do good to others. In fact, actions become impure when a man accepts his affinity for perishable objects and these lead him to bondage. This affinity makes not only actions but also objects and mind impure. As soon as this affinity is renounced, all the three become pure. It is affinity for the perishable, which is the main obstacle to salvation. Evam yo veditate. God, in spite of being without birth imperishable and the Lord of all beings, manifests himself of his own accord, and by keeping his nature, prakriti, under control, for the welfare of all beings. He who knows this fact, realizes the divine nature of the births of the Lord. Though all actions are performed by him, yet he is a non-doer, i.e., he has no pride of doership, Gita 4:13, nor does he desire the fruit of actions, Gita 4:14. He who knows fact, knows the divine nature of the Lord's actions. As the Lord manifests himself for the welfare of the entire creation and as he remains detached from actions, similarly, those people who live for the welfare of the world and remain detached from actions, know the divine nature of his births, manifestations, and actions. There is nothing in the three worlds that is to be done by the Lord, nor is there anything unattained that should be attained by him. Gita 3:22. Yet he manifests himself in this mortal world, by his grace to inspire beings to attain salvation. He carries on his wonderful pastime, also for the same purpose. When a person recites, hears, reads or thinks of his pastimes, he is linked with the Lord. When he is connected with the Lord, his tie with the world is cut off. When this bond with the world is snapped, he is not reborn, i.e., he is liberated from the bondage of birth and death. In fact, it is not action but desire which binds a man, and this desire is man-made. In order to satisfy his desire, he performs actions with a selfish motive. Being attached to these, they bind him. As desire is enhanced, he is inclined towards sinful actions, which lead him to his birth in evil bodies and to hell. But, when he performs actions without a selfish motive for the welfare of others, his actions become divine and uncommon. They do not lead him to bondage and he is not reborn. Mandi Sarjuna. When a man assumes his affinity for perishable actions, the ever-attainable Lord seems unattained to him. But, when actions are performed without expecting any reward, for the welfare of others, their direction is towards the world and the ever-attained Lord is realized. It is because of the Lord's divine nature that he descends to this mortal world, in order to shower his grace upon beings. Those who know this fact, become his devotees and then remain absorbed only in his adoration or devotion. Manasa 5:3412. This devotion leads to salvation. Similarly, when a man knows the divine nature of his actions, then his actions also become divine, viz., pure, and then these lead him, as well as others, to God realization, salvation, as he renounces his affinity for the world. It is the affinity which is an obstacle to salvation or God realization. A vital fact. Actions are transitory and perishable, and so is their fruit, while the self, soul, is uniform and eternal. Therefore, in fact the self has no affinity for actions. The affinity is merely assumed. While performing actions, if a man realizes that he has no affinity for them, his actions become divine. This is the reality about actions, and this is karmaga. When a man identifies himself with active nature, prakriti, it gives an impetus to action. He can never remain even for a moment without performing action. Gita 3:5. He thinks that his worldly objects are acquired by performing actions, so can the Lord be realized through them. But it is an error of judgment, because only perishable objects, rather than the imperishable Lord, can be acquired through perishable actions. The imperishable Lord can be attained by renouncing affinity for actions. This affinity for action can be renounced more easily through the discipline of action than through the discipline of knowledge. It is so because when all action with gross, subtle and causal bodies is performed for the welfare of the world without any selfish motive, their flow is towards the world, and so affinity for action is renounced. The Lord, by using the terms mamti, wants to explain that he whom a man wants to attain through the performance of actions is ever attained. What efforts are required to attain him who is ever attained and ever existent? Whatever was not otherwise attained is attained by effort. Two aspects are noteworthy in this regard: origin and discovery. Originated is that which has no independent existence, and which was absent in the beginning and perishes in the end. Discovered is that which has a separate existence forever. But God seems to get concealed when importance is attached to mundane actions and objects. When one uses actions and objects in rendering service to others, his affinity for actions and objects is automatically renounced and ever-attainable God is revealed. This is called discovery of the ever-attained. Carelessness and indolence in the performance of actions and the desire for fruit of actions are the main stumbling blocks to God realization. If actions are performed without the desire for fruit in rendering service to others, the affinity for actions is renounced and we realize our affinity for God, which is naturally eternal. Appendix: if actions are performed for the welfare of others in a disinterested way, or they are performed for the Lord's sake, those actions become divine and lead to salvation. But the actions performed ridden with desire for one's own self become impure and lead to bondage. Actions done without the sense of doership are of divine character. When actions are not performed for one's own self, the sense of doership is wiped out. The Lord's most insignificant action as well as the most significant action is his pastime. In his pastime the Lord, while acting like common man, remains untainted. Gita 4:13. The Lord's drama of life is divine. This divine nature of his drama is singular and is different from the divine nature of gods. The divine nature of gods in comparison with men is relatively divine and is limited, while the Lord's divinity is absolute and infinite. Though the actions of liberated, enlightened and God-loving exalted souls are also divine, but they are not like the Lord's pastimes. Even the common pastime of the Lord is very uncommon, unworldly. As the Lord's Rasala seems worldly, yet by reading it and by listening to it, a striver's lust, sex, is wiped out. Srimad, 10th Canto, 33rd Chapter, 40th Verse. This world is the beginningless incarnation of God. Adavatripurusa Parasya, Srimad 2:641. It means that God has manifested himself in the form of the world. But the embodied soul, because of his attachment to pleasures without recognizing it as the manifestation of God, has sustained it as the world. Givabaturn Mahabehoyadrajayat Jagat, Gita 7:5. In order to wipe out this notion, a striver should firmly believe that whatever is perceived, seen, is the manifestation of God, and whatever is happening is the pastime of the Lord. By assuming, accepting this, the world will remain as the world, and there is nothing except God. This truth will be realized. In other words, the world will disappear and only God will remain. The reason is that by thinking, accepting, everything in person as the manifestation of God and every action as the Lord's pastime, attraction for pleasure and also attachment aversion will not persist. When attachment to pleasure is wiped out, the actions which seemed worldly will appear divine as the pastime of the Lord, and the attachment to pleasure will be transformed into love, devotion for God. The Lord carries on this pastime according to the form in which he manifests himself. When he takes the form of Lord Krishna says to the sage Utanka, Mahabharata, Asva 54,113-14, for the protection and establishment of righteousness I manifest myself in many species and act according to those forms and guises. Mahabharata, Asva 54:17-19, 0 Brighyunandana. When I manifest myself as a deity, then I behave and act like deities, there is no doubt about it. When I incarnate as a Gandharva, celestial singers and musicians, I behave and act as a Gandharva, there is no doubt about it. When I manifest myself as a Naga, then I behave like Nagas. By manifesting myself as a gnome or as a devil, I behave and act just like them. We regard these as of others and for others, and render service to others with these. Attachment perishes because in fact, we have no affinity for such objects and actions. The Lord, without any selfish motive, descends to the mortal world, in order to inspire beings to attain salvation, as he is a disinterested friend of all beings. When a man has a firm belief that he is the disinterested friend of all beings, he is attracted towards God. The attraction for him wipes out attachment, for the world. For example, in childhood, children play the game of marbles and have attraction for the same. They ever quarrel for their possessions. But, when they grow old, instead of having attraction for marbles or toys, they have attraction for money. But, when they are inclined towards God, they have no attraction for mundane objects and riches, etc. Their attachment for them is renounced. As soon as it is renounced, fear and anger are rooted out, because both of these depend on attachment. When a man knows the truth about the divine nature of the Lord's birth and actions, he becomes dear to him. So he takes refuge in him, and gets absorbed in him. Those who have attraction for mundane pleasures get absorbed in the desire for pleasure, Gita 2:43, while those who have attraction for God ever remain absorbed in him, Narada Bhakti-sutra 70. They lose their individuality, because of their exclusive devotion to him, and identify themselves with him. Mamupasrital, L. The expression, Vitaragabhaya Krodha denotes total severance of connection with the world, while it also indicates that a striver taking refuge in him, gets absorbed in him. Cowhorses became just like their loving Lord Krishna in gait and manners, laughter and merriment, glance, speech, inclination and facial expression, etc. They, having forgotten themselves totally, became the embodiment of Lord Krishna, and copying his pastime began to utter, "I am no one else but Lord Krishna." Suranadba 1,013,013. Idle, he like a picture carries on the drama, pastime, of being motionless. If he doesn't remain immovable, how will his manifestation as an idol be proved? The Lord descended to this world as Rama and Krishna, etc., and also as a fish and a tortoise, etc. He carried on his pastime according to his form. As in Vrahivitra, incarnation as a boar, he played the drama as a boar, and in Vamanavitra, incarnation as a dwarf, he carried on the pastime as a celibate. Therefore a striver should hold that whatever is happening now is only the Lord's pastime. Link. The Lord, in the next verse, describes the traits of those devotees who know the divine nature of his birth and action, freed from attachment, fear and anger, absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, purified by the penance of knowledge. Many have attained union with my being. 10. Comment. When a man has disinclination for God, he gets attached to the perishable objects. It is because of his attachment that he has the sense of mine for the objects acquired and a desire for those unacquired. He has greed for the acquired objects and gets angry with those who are obstacles to the acquisition of those objects. If persons, who are obstacles, are stronger than him, it causes fear. Thus, attachment to perishable objects gives birth to fear, anger, greed, desire and feeling of mine, and such other vices. If attachment is renounced, all these vices perish. If instead of regarding the objects as ours, and for a man has to depend upon something or the other in this world, he, the soul, in spite of being a fragment of God, having no inclination for him, relies on perishable objects, such as riches, etc., which lead to his downfall. Not only this, but even if he depends on intellect, in order to perform virtuous actions, on the practice of spiritual discipline, or on renunciation of pleasure and prosperity, he cannot realize God quickly. So long as he, the self, does not depend on God, his dependence on world does not end, and he has to suffer pain. A man is attracted towards loving persons and objects, such as his wife and son, etc., while he depends on his superiors, such as parents and elders, etc. But a devotee of the Lord, has attraction for him and also depends on him, because for him, he is most loving and superior to all. Though a man is purified through the discipline of knowledge also, yet the term jnana, knowledge, has been used for knowing the reality about the divine nature of the Lord's birth and action. This knowledge purifies the man, because the Lord is the purest of the pure. The soul, being a fragment of God, is naturally pure. In the Manasa it is declared, the soul is sentient, pure and naturally a heap of joy. 7:117:1. By attaching importance to the perishable and by having the feeling of mine with them, he, the soul, becomes impure. When a man knows reality about the divine birth and divine actions of God, his attraction for the perishable and his feeling of mine for them totally perish, and then all impurity comes to an end, and he emerges very pure. This is karmaga. So the term jnana can stand for knowledge of karmaga, in which all acquired things, such as the body, senses, mind, intellect, rank, ability, authority, riches and property etc., are not one's own or for one's own self, but are of the world and for the world. Why? The reason is, that he, the self, is eternal. So how can perishable things stay with the imperishable soul, and be useful for it? Perishable things, such as the body etc., were neither with us before, nor will remain with us after death, and at present also, they are being destroyed every moment. We have a right to make proper use of acquired objects, rather than to lay claim to them. These things, objects, belong to the world, and so they should be used in rendering service to the world. This is their proper use. But if anyone regards these as his, or for him, it is a bondage or impurity for him. When a person does not regard perishable things as his or for him, it means that he performs the penance of knowledge, which purifies him. The penance of knowledge is superior to all other austerities. Through this, the assumed affinity for the insentient matter is renounced totally. So long as a man assumes his affinity for the insentient, he is not so easily purified by any other penance, as he is purified by that knowledge, through which his affinity for matter is renounced. Being purified by the penance of knowledge, a man attains to his being, which is truth, consciousness, and bliss. It means that as the Lord is eternal, he also resides in him constantly. As the Lord is untainted and unaffected, he also remains untainted and unaffected. As nothing remains to be done by God, nothing further remains to be done by him. A man, through the discipline of knowledge, also attains to his being. Gita 14:19. Many devotees, having been purified by the penance of knowledge, have attained him. So strivers at present, also being purified by the penance of knowledge, should attain him. Everyone is independent in attaining him, because this human body has been bestowed upon them, only to attain God. The devotees attain him. Now the question arises, how they attain him. The Lord answers the question, in the next verse. O Partha! However, the way devotees worship me, so do I approach them, for all men ultimately follow my path. 11. Comment. Howsoever devotees seek God, so does he meet them, and grant them their heart's desires. He reveals himself to a devotee in the same form in which he thinks of him. If a devotee thinks of him as his preceptor, he becomes an excellent preceptor. Similarly, God becomes a worthy father or mother, son, brother, friend, or even an obedient servant, according to the desire of the devotee. If a devotee feels restless without God, he also becomes restless without his devotee. Arjuna regarded Lord Krishna as his friend, and wanted to make him his chariot driver. Therefore, he became his chariot driver. Sage Visvamitra treated him as a disciple, so he became his disciple. Therefore, with whatever sentiment devotees seek him, he correlates, by the same sentiment. The Lord of infinite worlds reciprocates to the sentiments of his own created common beings. How generous, affectionate and merciful he is. This topic reveals the Lord manifests himself for the sake of his devotees. He descends to the earth, according to the sentiment of his devotees. It is mentioned in the Upanishad, the Lord felt lonely, Brihadaranyaka 1:4-3. So he manifested himself in different forms and started his sport. Similarly, when devotees have a desire to take part in divine sport in the company of the Lord, he manifests himself, in order to take part. When a devotee cannot suffer his separation from God, God also cannot bear it from him. Though the words yatha, in whatever way, and tatha, so, explains, that in whatever way a devotee seeks him, he reciprocates his sentiments, yet there is a great difference in their manner. If a devotee takes one step towards God, God may take hundreds of strides to meet him. The Lord is omnipresent, omnipotent and omniscient. Moreover, he is his devotee's supreme and unselfish friend and true to his resolve. A devotee should use his full power to attain him, then the Lord is attained, through his limitless power. A striver himself creates obstacle in God realization, because he does not apply his intellect, resources, time and power etc., to the full extent, in order to attain him. If he, without regarding these as his own, utilizes them fully for God realization, he may realize him soon. Actually, they are the Lord's, because they have been bestowed upon by him. A feeling of mine is the main obstacle to God realization. Man himself is also a fragment of God, but he considers himself separate from God, while the Lord does not think so. In fact, a striver cannot develop devotion to God through the performance of actions. Devotion is automatically bestowed upon a devotee who takes refuge in him. The refuge, surrender, is the best sentiment out of all the other feelings such as of service, of friendship, of affection and of sweet love etc. The Lord seems to declare that if a devotee dedicates his possessions to him, God would offer his possessions to the devotee, and if he offers himself to him, God reciprocates. What an easy and economic transaction God realization is! When a devotee surrenders himself at his feet, he does not even remember his sins of the past. He only thinks of his present emotions, hundreds of times. Manasa 129:3. In this 11th verse, there is no description of scriptural subjects, such as dualism or non-dualism, the Lord endowed with attributes or attributelless, or different kinds of salvation etc. But, here is a description of the feeling of mine with God. Only God is mine and I am only God's. This feeling of mine for God enables a striver to attain him quickly and easily. Therefore, a striver should accept his affinity for God, even if he does not understand it. By doing so, he will realize his affinity for him which is real. Question: the Lord reciprocates the same sentiment with which a devotee seeks him. If a devotee approaches him with the sentiment of hatred or enmity etc., will the Lord reciprocate the same? Answer: this is a topic of surrender, refuge, to him, rather than of hatred or enmity, so no such question should arise. Even then, if we think over the question seriously, we come to realize that the purpose of the Lord in reciprocating the same sentiment to the person concerned is to inspire him for salvation. The Lord is a disinterested friend of all beings, Gita 5:29. Therefore, he thinks of their welfare and acts accordingly. He does the same, even for those who may have feelings of hatred and enmity for him. When Lord Rama sent Angada as a messenger to the court of Ravana, he urges him to convey his message in such a way that his purpose may be served and it may contribute to his, Ravana's, welfare. Manasa 6:17-4. Not only the Lord, but his devotees, are also disinterested friends of all beings. Srimad Bhagavata 3:25-21. When, even a devotee cannot harm anyone, how can the Lord, who is the most merciful and disinterested friend of all beings, harm anyone? A person may have affinity for him with any sentiment, yet he inspires him for salvation only. As a bath in the Ganges, both in winter and summer is rewarding, yet while bathing in winter a man feels cold and during summer, he feels refreshed. Similarly, many persons out of desire, hatred, fear and love, having concentrated their minds on God, being purged of their sins, have attained God in the same way as devotees attain him through devotion. Srimad Bhagavata 7:1129. Those devotees who worship him with devotion attain eternal bliss, but that bliss is not attained by those who have negative feelings of hatred or enmity for him. Mamavartmanuvartant manasi parthasarvasasi. Whatsoever a great man does, the same is done by others, as well. Gita 3:21. God is the Supreme Being. He is superior to all the great men, so all people follow him. The same fact has been pointed out in the second half of the 23rd verse of the 3rd chapter. The Lord ever remains prepared to reciprocate the sentiment of his devotee. King Dasaratha treats him as his son. So he becomes an obedient son and cannot disobey his father. The Lord wants to reveal the secret that a devotee should accept the same relationship with him, which he has with a person who is most loving to him, whether he is his son, father, or whether she is his mother. By doing so, the Lord will become most loving to him, and thus the person will be able to attain him easily. Secondly, the Lord wants to urge the people that by following his footsteps they should also become worthy sons or parents or brothers, husbands, wives or sisters, etc. Moreover, they should render service to other members of a family, without expecting any reward from them and without being proud of their action. Those who have affinity with parents and other relatives, only for rendering selfless service to them, follow the Lord's path in the real sense. By doing so, for the good of others, they will be free from the feeling of mine, and they will develop devotion for God and attain him. An important fact: egoistic notions and selfishness are the stumbling blocks to Lord Rama declares. One can enter fire, can eat deadly poison, and can jump into the sea in order to carry out the order of my father. Valmiki Ramayana, Ayodhya, 1828-29. Devotion for God. When a man loves anyone, without egoism and selfishness, that love automatically flows towards the Lord. It is because of egoism and selfishness that his love is confined to narrow limits. But, when such evil propensities are renounced, his love becomes widespread. In that case, the assumed affinity for the world perishes, and instinctively the real affinity for God is revealed. The man, soul, is a fragment of God, Gita 15:7, and so his affinity for God is natural. But when he, the soul, having forgotten this real affinity, assumes the affinity for the world, he has to follow the cycle, bondage, of birth and death. This bondage is twofold. One is due to his not realizing his real affinity with God. Another is due to his assumed affinity with the world. But when he realizes his real affinity for God, i.e., takes refuge in him, he becomes free from worry, fear, sorrow, and doubt. Then, he is said to follow the Lord's path. Appendix: This universe is clearly the manifestation of God, yet the Lord reveals himself before us in the same form in which we perceive, see, him. We regarding the self as body need things and desire them, then God manifests himself in the form of those things. If being established in the ascetic, unreal, we perceive, see, the unreal, the Lord is also perceived in the unreal form. As a child wants a toy, its father brings it a toy even by spending money. Similarly, whatever we want, the most merciful God, ever being eternal reality, appears before us in the same form. If we don't desire pleasures, why should the Lord appear before us in the form of pleasures? Why need he assume the artificial form? Though the terms yada and tatha, as and so, have been used for the Lord's nature, yet the Lord ever showers his great grace upon beings, because an insignificant being can't be compared with the Supreme Lord. What is the strength of its own in a being except the sense of pride? Even then, if a person is attracted towards God, God is also attracted towards the person. As Vidyanidhi was oblivious of herself after beholding Lord Krishna also was not in himself, and he ate the skin of banana offered by Vidyanidhi and relished it. In the Lord's nature, yada tatha are applicable in actions rather than in feelings. The Lord also showers his love and grace on an atheist ever in the same way as he showers it on a theist, believer. Therefore in the Lord's yada tatha there is no selfish motive, but it is the Lord's glory, greatness. Otherwise how can a common being be compared with the greatest Lord? Even then he makes friends with an ordinary being and elevates him equal to his rank. The Lord does not regard himself as great, this is his greatness. Link in the preceding verse, the Lord declared, "As men approach me, so do I accept them." It means that it is very easy to realize God. Then why do people not worship God? The Lord answers the question in the next verse. Those who desire the fruits of their actions worship the gods because success is quickly attained by men through action. 12. A man is eligible to perform new actions, and it is seen that success is attained through action. So, he firmly believes that God is also realized through action, penance, meditation and trance, etc., just as worldly objects are acquired through actions. He does not pay attention to the fact that worldly things are acquired through actions, as they are limited. They are not ever attained, they are separate from us, and they are changeful, while the Lord cannot be acquired through action, as he is not a product of action. He pervades everywhere, is ever attained, is not separate from us, the self, and is unchanging. So, he can be attained, as soon as a keen desire to realize him is aroused. Keen desire for God realization is not aroused because of the preference for worldly pleasures and prosperity. The Lord is like a father, while the gods are like shopkeepers. We can take a thing from a shopkeeper only by paying the money, but we can take it from the Father free of cost. Similarly, we have to perform rituals according to scriptural methods for gods, in order to obtain fruits from them, while God bestows upon us our necessities, free of cost. Moreover, as a shopkeeper gives even hazardous things, such as a matchbox or a knife etc., to a boy on payment, but if the boy wants such things from his father, the latter will not only refuse but take away the money also. A father gives only beneficial things to a boy. The gods also bestow upon their devotees harmful gifts without thinking of their welfare, at the due completion of a ritual. But the Lord, like a father, bestows only those gifts which are for the welfare of devotees. In spite of this fact, the ignorant or dull-witted people, because of their attachment, sense of mind and desire for the perishable materials, worship other gods, as they do not realize the glory, the benevolence and selflessness, friendliness of the Lord. Gita 7:20-23 9:23-24. This human world is the field for actions. Besides this, other worlds, such as heaven and hell etc., are for reaping fruits of past actions. The Lord also declares, below in the world of men stretch forth the roots of the universe as a tree, entangling man in the bondage of actions. Gita 15:2. But the other worlds, heaven and hell etc., exist, so that human beings may reap desirable or undesirable fruits respectively of their virtuous and evil actions. Only human beings are eligible to perform new actions, which bear fruit here, as well as hereafter. Beasts and birds etc. cannot perform new actions. In this human world those people who are attached to action, live. Gita 14:15. It is because of their attachment to actions, that they are charmed by success, which is attained through action. This success is attained quickly, but it is short-lived. When actions are transitory, how could success attained through actions be permanent? Therefore, the fruit of perishable actions is also perishable. Those who perform actions with a desire for fruit, think of the fruit only, they do not think of the perishable nature of that fruit. They take refuge in the gods and worship them, only because they bestow upon them success quickly, when rituals are duly completed. But because of their desire for fruit of action, they never get liberated from the bondage of action. Consequently, they have to follow the cycle of birth and death. The real success of human life is God realization, and that cannot be attained through action. A striver cannot even follow the disciplines of action, knowledge, and devotion, which are the means of God realization, through action. He can attain yoga, not through action but through the renouncement of actions. Question: action is said to be the means to attain yoga. Gita 6:3. Then, how is it that a man cannot attain yoga through action? Answer: in karma, actions are performed in order to renounce affinity for actions, and the material for actions. Yoga, union with God, is natural, so yoga or God realization cannot be attained through actions. In fact, actions are unreal, but when these are performed for the sake of the Supreme, they are called sattvas, real. Gita 17:27. When a person performs action with a selfish motive, he does not realize yoga, i.e., eternal union with God. In karma, actions are performed for others, not for one's own self, i.e., not for their fruit. Gita 2:47. Actions, which are performed with a selfish motive, bind a man. Gita 3:9. While actions, which are performed for others, liberate him from the bondage of actions. Gita 4:23. When actions are performed for others, affinity for actions and their fruit is renounced, and that renouncement is conducive to the realization of yoga, i.e., union with God. While performing actions, a man has to depend on the changing objects, such as the body, senses, mind, intellect, person etc., which are different from the self, soul. The self ever remains uniform without undergoing any modification at all. Therefore, in self-realization there is no need in the least for the objects, such as the body etc., which are different from the self. A man naturally realizes the self as soon as he renounces his assumed affinity for worldly objects etc., which are different from him. The self links as having described the objects of his manifestation. In the 8th verse, the Lord explains the merit of knowing the divine character of his actions. In the 9th verse, there he explained that actions lose their divine character, i.e., become impure, when these are performed with a desire for fruit. In the next 2 verses, the Lord specially explains how they gain their divine character, purity. The fourfold order was created by me according to the modes of their nature and action, karma. Though I am the creator, know me, the immortal Lord, to be a non-doer. Since I have no craving for the fruit of actions, these do not taint me. He who knows me thus, in reality, is not affected by actions. 13-14 Comment. The Lord created the 4 castes, order G Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra, according to the modes of nature and actions of previous birth. Besides human beings, the Lord created the gods, manes and other forms of life also, according to the modes of their nature and action, without showing the least partiality. The fourfold caste, order, does not apply only to human beings, but also to birds, beasts and trees etc. Among birds, pigeons are regarded as Brahmana, hawks, kites and crows are regarded respectively as Kshatriya, Vaishya and Sudra. Similarly Pipala, Nirna, tamarind, and acacia, are regarded respectively as Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. But here the term Chaturvamyam stands only for human beings, because they can understand this distinction and can perform their duty accordingly. When the Lord declares that the fourfold caste was created by him, he means to say that all of these are his fragments and he is their disinterested friend. Therefore, he always thinks of their welfare. On the other hand, they are neither fragments of the gods nor are the gods their disinterested friends. So they should worship him only through the performance of their own duty. Gita 18:46. The 4 castes, orders of society, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Sudra, are classified according to the mode of nature. In Brahmana the mode of goodness predominates, in Kshatriya the mode of passion predominates, while the modes of goodness is secondary. In Vaishya the mode of passion predominates, while the mode of ignorance is secondary, subordinate, while in Sudra the mode of ignorance predominates. Thus the castes were determined on the basis of the mode of nature. Though the Lord creates, preserves and destroys the entire universe, yet he remains unconnected, untainted, as he has no feeling of doership. He is called Dvaiyam, unspent. Only he is the material, as well as the efficient cause of creation. For example, in a pot of clay, clay is material cause and the potter is the efficient cause, because while creating the world he remains uniform, neither his energy is spent to create it, like the potter who spends his energy to make a pot, nor is the material consumed when the pot is made. The soul, being a fragment of God, is also imperishable. But a man does not realize this fact, because he regards the acquired body, senses, mind, intellect, wealth and property etc., as his own, and for himself. As soon as he regards these as the world's and for the world, he will realize his immortality. By using the term vidhi, the Lord urges strivers to understand the divine nature of his actions. When actions are performed without having any affinity for those or the material and fruit of actions, then these become divine. When the Lord creates the universe, he has not the least affinity for his actions, nor is there any flaw or partiality etc. in his actions, nor any attachment or feeling of mine, or desire for the fruit of actions. So those actions do not taint him. All perishable objects are fruits of actions. The Lord urges strivers that they, like him, should have no craving for the fruit of actions. If they perform actions without having any craving for the fruit of actions, the actions will not bind them. In the 13th verse, the Lord explained that he is a non-doer, i.e., he has no sense of doership, in spite of performing all actions, such as the creation of the universe etc. In this verse, he explains that he has no craving for the fruit of actions. Therefore, a striver should also perform actions without a sense of doership and without having any desire for the fruit of actions. By doing so, he is automatically liberated from the bondage of actions. Itimam yabajanati desires are born, when a man has an eye on the perishable mundane objects, and then he cannot know the reality about God, who is immortal. As soon as desires are renounced, the inner sense is purified, and then naturally one reflects on God. By having an eye on him, he comes to know that he is a disinterested friend of all beings, and all actions performed by him aim at the welfare of all beings. The Lord bestows this human body upon us, in order to enable us to be liberated from the bondage of actions. But a man without knowing this fact, assumes his affinity for actions, and is thus held captive. Therefore the Lord, in spite of having neither a sense of doership, nor desire for fruit, creates the universe by his grace, so as to inspire human beings to attain salvation by becoming free from the bondage of actions. When a man knows him thus, in reality, he is attracted to him. So Lord Shiva in the Rarnakayarota Manasa says to Uma, he who knows the nature of Lord Rama, ever remains engrossed in his adoration. 534-2 Karanavarnasabhadyut, the Lord's actions are ever divine. The actions of saints and sages also become divine. Not only saints and sages, but also men can make their actions divine, by doing away with desire, attachment and a sense of mine, which are impurities in actions. When actions are purged of impurities, these become divine, and they do not bind men. These lead them, as well as others, who follow them, to salvation. An easy means to make actions divine is to use the objects etc., acquired from the world, to render service to the world, without regarding these as one's own, and for one's own self. We should give a serious thought to the fact that we neither brought the objects, such as the body etc., with us when we came, nor can we carry these with us when we go, or change these of our own accord, nor maintain them. Similarly, the subtle and the causal bodies, being the evolutes of nature, Prakriti, also undergo modifications, and therefore, we have no affinity for these. Moreover, those objects are not for us, because had they been for us, or having acquired them, there would have been no further desire to acquire anything else. So it is a blunder to accept these as ours, and for us. They seem to us to be ours, so that we use them in rendering service to others rather than to lay a claim on them. We should have no desire to acquire anything from the world, nor even to gain any favor from God. We should rather surrender ourselves to Him. The Lord Himself has provided all the necessities of life to us, because He is very gracious and merciful. He knows our needs more than we know ours, as we are dull-witted, while He is very sharp. So, without desiring anything, we should use the things that we possess, for the welfare of others without any selfish motive. By doing so, our affinity for actions and objects etc. is renounced, in God, who is an embodiment of bliss, is realized. Appendix: the author of worldly creation, the non-doership of God remains unaffected. Similarly, the non-doership of the self also remains unaffected. See Sariraskpai Kandiyana Kairadina Lipyat, Gita 13:31. But being deluded, he thinks that he is the doer. Gita 3:27. Karma, Kriya and Lila, the three may appear to be the same, but really they are totally different. The Kriya, which is done with the sense of egoism and bears desirable and undesirable fruit, is called karma, action. The Kriya, activity, which is done without the sense of doership and which does not bear fruit, is called kriya, as breathing, opening and closing the eyes, movement of the pulse, beating of the heart etc. The kriya which is free from the sense of doership and from the desire for fruit, and also divine, and for the welfare of the world, is called lila. Actions done by worldly people are karma, and by liberated people are kriya, and by God they are mere sports, or say lila lokavatula lokavlium. Brahma Sutra 2-1133, viz., as the world without real existence appears to be existing, similarly the Lord's activity, such as the creation of the universe etc., is merely His pastime. It means that the Lord, in spite of being a non-doer, seems to be a doer because of His pastime. Katyurvarnyam Maya Srastanguna Karma Vibhagasa. This expression proves that according to the Gita, a person's caste is determined by his birth. A person's caste, or varna, order of life, is determined by the caste of his parents. The word jati is made from the root jan pradurbhav, which proves that the caste is determined by birth. By karma there is the word kirti, which is made from the root dukarn. But the caste is fully preserved by only discharging the duty prescribed for one's own caste. Link describing the divine character of his actions, in the preceding verse, and citing examples of ancient seekers of liberation. In the next verse, the Lord advises Arjuna to perform his duty disinterestedly. Having known this, the ancient seekers of salvation also the Lord has also called it Sesta in the Gita Sadrasam. Sestate, 333, performed action, karma, therefore, do thou also perform action, as the ancients did, in former times. 15 Comment. The Lord here concludes the topic of the divine character of actions, which he began in the 9th verse. Arjuna was a seeker of liberation, salvation, but he did not think that the performance of his duty, of fighting, would lead him to salvation. So he wanted to renounce the duty, as to him it was horrible. Gita 3:1. Therefore, Lord Krishna urges Arjuna to attain salvation, through performing his duty, and cited the example of ancient seekers of liberation, who attained salvation by performing their duty. The Lord is emphasizing the same fact here, which he mentioned, in the 20th verse of the 3rd chapter, by citing the example of Janaka and others, and, in the 1st and 2nd verses of this chapter, by citing examples of Vivatvan, Manu and Ikshvaku etc. It is mentioned in the scriptures, that when desire for liberation is aroused in a striver, he should abandon actions, because in that case, he becomes eligible to attain knowledge, wisdom, rather than to perform actions. But here, he urges Arjuna, a seeker of liberation, to perform his duty in a disinterested manner, and cites the example of other ancient seekers of liberation. Karmaga, discipline of action, consists in remaining established in yoga, union with God, while performing duty, and in performing duty while remaining firm in yoga. Actions are performed for the world, while yoga, union with God, is for one's own self. Performance of actions and non-performance of actions are two states. A yogi transcends the two. Without action should be performed so long as a striver does not develop dispassion or has no reverence to listen to my, God's, life history. Srimad Bhagavata 11:29. Being attached to either of the two. This yoga is detachment incarnate. This is not a state. It is God realization. The Lord, in the 14th verse, declared, actions do not taint, bind, me, since I have no craving for the fruit of actions. A person, who having known this skill, karmaga, performs actions, by renouncing the desire for fruit, is not bound by actions, as the Lord declares. He who is attached to the fruit of action, is bound. Gita 5:12. Actions, which a man performs, in order to gain pleasures or wealth or honor and praise or paradise etc., bind him. Gita 3:9. But, if he performs actions, for the well-being of others, without any selfish motive, to renounce his affinity for the world, the actions do not bind him. Gita 4:23. The reason is, that when actions are performed for others, the flow is towards the world and thus attachment for them perishes. No new affinity for them is born, because there is no desire for the fruit. The Lord orders Arjuna to perform actions, for the welfare of the world, like other seekers of liberation, because he is also a seeker of liberation. All the mundane materials, such as, the body, senses, mind and intellect etc., required for the performance of actions, have their identity with the world. While they are different from the self, they have been acquired from the world, so that service to the world may be rendered, with them. If they are used by a person in performing actions for himself, he gets attached to those actions, but if all actions are performed for the welfare of others, he is not attached to them. As soon as this attachment is renounced, he realizes his yoga, i.e., union with God, which is eternal. Appendix. In the 13th and 14th verses the Lord declared, I perform actions such as the creation of the universe etc., but those actions don't bind me because I am free from the sense of doership and the desire of fruit. Here the Lord declares that the seekers of salvation have also performed actions by renouncing the sense of doership and the desire for fruit. The reason is that actions performed with the sense of doership and with the desire for fruit alone lead to bondage. Therefore the Lord asks Arjuna to perform actions in the same way as the seekers of salvation have performed. In Jnana first there is renunciation of the sense of doership worship, and then the desire for fruit automatically disappears. In karmaga, first there is renunciation of the desire for fruit, and then the sense of doership easily get extinct. Links S and the preceding verse, the Lord explained that having known the divine character of actions, the ancient seekers of liberation performed actions. Now, the Lord in the next verse starts the topic of knowing the truth about action. What is action? What is an action? As to this, even the wise are confused. Therefore, I will explain to you what action is, by knowing which, you shall be liberated from its evil effect, i.e., worldly bondage. 16 Comment Kim Karma. Common men believe that activities done with the body and senses are mere actions, while non-performance of an act is an action. But, the Lord declares that activities performed with body, speech and mind are actions. Gita 18:15. An action is determined by the motive by which it is performed. An action, such as adoration of a goddess, is of the motive goodness, but if it is undertaken with the motive of fulfilling mundane desires, it becomes a motive passion. If it is undertaken with the motive of someone's ruin, the same action is of the motive ignorance. In the same way, actions which are performed without attachment, a sense of mind and desire for fruits, are classed as an action, and these do not bind a man to the fruit of action. It means that truth about action cannot be determined by outward activity only. In this connection, even wise men, possessing knowledge of the scriptures, get confused, i.e., they are at a loss to understand the truth. An action is classed as an action or inaction, or is forbidden, according to the motive with which it is performed. Therefore, the Lord declares that he will explain to Arjuna what action is, why and how it binds a man, and how he can be liberated from it and by knowing the truth about it. If a man has a sense of mind, attachment and desire for fruits, it means that action is being performed by him, i.e., he is tainted by that action, even though he does not perform an outward action. On the other hand, if he has neither a sense of mind, nor attachment nor desire for fruit, it means that actions are not being performed by him, i.e., he is not tainted by such actions, even though he performs actions. Thus performance or non-performance of actions is an action, if he has no attachment, while performance or non-performance of actions is classed as action, if he has any attachment. Krima. The Lord divided action into two groups: actions and inaction. Actions bind a man, while inactions, which are undertaken for others, liberate him. In reality, physical abjuring of actions is not an action. The Lord has declared that the renunciation of actions through delusion is stated to be of the nature of ignorance. Gita 18:17. The exclusion of action from fear of physical suffering is called passionate. Gita 18:8. In the renunciation of the nature of ignorance and passion, the affinity for actions is not renounced, though the performance of actions is. Renunciation, in which attachment and desire for reward are abandoned, is regarded as one of goodness. Gita 18:9. In fact, this is called inaction, because affinity for actions is renounced in such an exclusion. Therefore, inaction consists in the performance of actions, by remaining untainted by them. Even the wise are confused about the truth of what an inaction is. The reality about inaction or an inaction is that it should not bind a man. Arjuna holds that he will attain salvation if he does not indulge himself in the cruel deed of fighting. So the Lord declares that a man does not attain to perfection by mere renunciation of action. Gita 3:4, but he can attain it even by engaging himself in battle. Gita 2:38. Thus an action consists either in the performance of actions by remaining untainted or in remaining untainted while performing actions. Kavapyatari Mahata. How can common men understand the truth about action and inaction, when even the learned who are well versed in the scriptures are at a loss to grasp this topic? It means that only the liberated souls or the Lord knows the truth about action and inaction. Tata karma pravakyami. A man, the soul, is bound by actions, so he will also be liberated by action. The Lord promises here that he will declare the reality about actions, so that they may not lead him to bondage and he may be liberated from the bondage of the cycle of birth and death. In fact, it is neither action nor inaction which binds a man, but it is the desire, the sense of mind and attachment, which bind him. If he renounces desire and feelings of possession and attachment, he is liberated, while performing action, and not by performing it. One who understands this fact, knows the reality about actions. In the 50th verse of the 2nd chapter, the Lord declared, Yoga is skill in action. It means that yoga viz, equanimity, evenness of mind, is the means to be liberated from the binding nature of actions. Arjuna could not understand this point, therefore, the Lord promises to explain this point again. An important fact: karma is not an action. It is selfless service. In it non-attachment predominates. Service and non-attachment both are not actions. Discrimination plays an important role in both of these. As the body, senses, mind and intellect etc. are acquired, these are transitory. They should be used only in rendering service to the world, because these have been acquired from the world. Moreover, these will have to be renounced. But the self or God who is ours can never be renounced. Only that which is really not ours, but we have assumed as ours, is renounced. In fact, this is not renunciation, it is discrimination. All materials, the body, senses, mind and intellect etc., are neither of the self, nor for the self, but are of the world and for the world. The self ever remains unaffected and uniform, while the materials are changing. Therefore whatever action is performed with these materials is for the good of others, not for the self. In this there is a vital fact, that no action can be performed without materials. Even the greatest writer cannot write without ink, pen and paper, which are of the world. Therefore, when a person uses the articles of the world for the world, he in fact does not render any service to the world. He gives the things of the world to the world. Thus he merely uses his discrimination. Thus, it is discrimination which leads to renunciation and service. Discrimination has been bestowed upon beings from time immemorial. Had it been the fruit of virtuous action, how could virtuous actions have been performed without discrimination? It is discrimination by which one can resolve to perform virtuous actions, by renouncing evil actions. As discrimination is self-evident, so is karma, discipline of action, which involves no labor. Similarly, in the discipline of knowledge, the self, which is detached, is self-evident, while in the discipline of devotion, the affinity for God is self-evident. The self is good and virtuous, while the ever-changing world is bad or evil. The self, in spite of being an eternal fragment of God, and developing a disinclination for God, has got entangled in the perishable world. The Lord declares that he will describe reality about action, by knowing which he, Arjuna, will be liberated from its evil effect, i.e., worldly bondage of the cycle of birth and death. The topic of knowledge of action, which begins in this verse, will be concluded in the 32nd verse with the declaration, thus knowing, thou shalt be liberated. A vital fact in the term, karma, actions, are performed for the world, while yoga, union with God, is for the self. Action and non-action, these are the two states of action, which involve egoism. So long as a man has egoistic notions, he has affinity for the world, and so long as he has affinity for the world, he continues to have egoistic notions. But yoga transcends the two states. In order to realize that yoga, it is essential to be free from egoism. The method of being free from egoism is performance or non-performance of actions, by being equanimous and remaining equanimous during performance or non-performance of actions. It means that he should have equanimity, evenness of mind, during the performance and non-performance of actions. Gita 2:48, i.e., he should remain untainted. Those who believe that a man is inclined towards the world by performance of actions, and is inclined towards God through non-performance of actions, and having a disinclination for the world, meditate on God and experience a trance, also perform actions. The feeling that God, perfection, will be attained through meditation and trance, is also a subtle form of action, because one expects God realization through performance of actions, in the form of meditation and trance, while God is beyond action, as well as inaction. The Lord declares that he will explain the reality about action by which one will attain God, immediately. God pervades everywhere, all the time, through things, persons, bodies, senses, minds, intellects and life breaths etc., equally. He remains united with us, when we perform actions and when we do not perform actions. But we are unable to realize him, because of our affinity for actions and objects. Born of nature, Prakriti, a man has an egoistic notion, equally during the performance of actions, as well as during the non-performance of actions, but his egoism merges in the world, when he instead of performing actions for himself, performs these, for the welfare of the world. Link in the next verse. Lord Krishna inspires Arjuna to know the reality of action and inaction. The reality about actions must be known, as well about forbidden actions. Even so the reality about inaction must be understood, for mysterious is the nature of action. 17 Comment. Karmano hyapi bodhavyam. He who remains untainted while performing actions knows the truth about actions, described in the 18th verse, by the expression, he who sees an action in action. Actions can be divided into 3 groups, according to the motive by which these are performed, i.e., action, inaction and forbidden action. An activity undertaken, according to spiritual injunctions with a desire for fruit, is called action. Action which is performed, being free from the desire for fruit, sense of mine and attachment, for the welfare of others, is classed as an action. Even prescribed action, performed with the motive of doing evil to others, or giving pain to them, is classed as forbidden action. He who performs actions while remaining untainted knows the reality about inaction, described in the 18th verse, by the expression action and inaction. When a man has desire, actions are performed. But when desire is enhanced, then forbidden actions, sinful, are done. The Lord, in the 38th verse of 2nd chapter, declared, treating alike, pleasure and pain, gain and loss, victory and defeat, get ready for battle, the horrible deed involving violence, thus thou shalt not incur sin. It means that if actions are performed with equanimity, the seemingly forbidden actions are also transformed into inaction. Forbidden actions are called vikana. Desire is the cause of forbidden actions. Gita 3:36-37. Therefore, in order to give up forbidden actions, one should renounce desire. The essence of vikana, sin, is desire, and to know the essence of vikarma is to abandon all forbidden actions physically and so leave no trace of desire, which is the cause of vikana. In the 16th chapter, where the demoniac nature has been described there from the 8th verse to the 23rd verse, the term kama, desire, has been used 9 times. It shows that desire is the cause of demoniac nature, forbidden actions. It is difficult to understand which actions bind a man and which liberate him. Even learned men, knowing the scriptures, cannot decide what is action, what is inaction, and what is forbidden action. Arjuna also finds himself in a dilemma, and so he thinks that the performance of his duty of fighting is a cruel deed. Therefore, the Lord states that mysterious is the nature of action. Question. In this verse, the Lord declares that truth about forbidden actions must be known, while he does not make mention of the forbidden actions in the topic from the 19th verse to the 23rd verse. Why? Answer. In the topic from the 19th verse to the 23rd verse, the Lord has prominently mentioned inaction in action, so that all actions may turn to inaction, i.e., actions may not lead to bondage. A desire is the root of every action. As the desire intensifies, it results in forbidden actions. Therefore it is said that vikarma is quite near to karma. Therefore, the Lord has referred to forbidden actions as wretched, so that men may renounce these, as well as the desire which is their main root. First, desire leads a man to action, and then its enhancement leads one to perform forbidden actions. But, when desire is renounced, all actions turn to inaction. The significance of the topic discussed in these verses is to know the essence of an action and what leads to annihilation of desires. When desire is renounced, forbidden actions are not performed. So the Lord does not consider it necessary to include vikarma in the topic from the 19th to the 23rd verses. Secondly, the Lord does not want to dwell upon forbidden actions in detail, because these must be renounced as they lead to sins and hells. But, in this topic there is an emphasis on the renunciation of desire in 419 by the expression devoid of desires and thoughts of the world, in 420 by the expression having abandoned attachment to the fruit of action, in 4121 by the expression having no desire, in 422 by even-minded in success and failure, and in 423 by one who is devoid of attachment and works for sacrifice. Thus, the Lord has said, that truth about forbidden actions must be known, so that a man, having known it, may renounce desire, which is the root of forbidden actions. Appendix: It is very difficult to gauge what fruit an action bears at present and in future for others. While performing an action, a man thinks that it is of benefit to him, but actually it causes harm to him. He may work for profit, but it may end in loss. He acts for pleasure, whereas his act results in pain. The reason is that due to the sense of doership and the desire for fruit, attachment to pleasure, man cannot determine the true nature of actions. Link in the next verse. The Lord eulogizes a person who knows the truth about actions. He, who sees an action in action and action in an action, is wise among men. He is a yogi and performs all his duties. 18 Comment: Seeing in action means, to remain untainted during performance or non-performance of actions. It means also that performance or non-performance of actions is not for the self. When a man thinks that he is the doer and so he should reap the fruit of action, he is bound by such actions. As actions are perishable, so is their fruit. The self is eternal and has no affinity for the changing actions and their fruits. Yet, it is bound, because of the desire for fruit. Therefore, the Lord in the 14th verse declared, "Actions don't bind me, because I have no desire for the fruit of actions." It is the desire for fruit which binds one. The Lord declares, "He who is attached to the fruit of action is bound." Gita 5:12. If a striver has no desire for fruit, new attachment does not arise and old attachment perishes. When actions are performed for the welfare of others, thus, he becomes totally dispassionate. This dispassionate nature turns all actions into an action. A man has to take birth either to be free of obligations or receive these from others. For all previous births, this exchange has been going on for several births. He cannot get rid of the cycle of birth and death, so long as he does not repay his debt. The way to close his account is, that he should pay to others what he owes to them and should not expect them to repay to him their debts. Thus, the account will be closed and he will be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Gita 4:23. If a person does nothing for himself, and has no desire, he gets detached from all actions and objects etc., because all objects and materials etc., such as the body, senses, mind, intellect and life breaths are of the world, not one's own, as these have been acquired from the world, so that service may be rendered to the world with these. Therefore, when a striver performs all actions, service, adoration, chant, meditation and trances also, for the welfare of the world, the flow of action is towards the world and the striver remains detached and untainted. This is seeing in action. So long as a striver has affinity for the body and the world, the performance or non-performance of actions will be included in action. So, a karmagi should remain untainted, detached, while he performs actions, as also while he does not. When a man performs actions, without having any desire for fruit, profit, honor, praise and pleasure, here or hereafter, it means that he is detached, untainted, during the performance of actions. Similarly, when he does not perform any action, he should not desire, in the least, to gain honor, praise, pleasures and bodily rest etc., by non-performance of actions. He, who abandons action, because it is painful or out of fear from physical suffering or practices relinquishment of passion, Rajasatiga, while he who renounces his obligatory duty out of delusion, indolence and heedlessness, practices tamasatiga, both kinds of relinquishment, must be totally abandoned. Similarly, if a man does not perform action, so that he may enjoy the state of meditation or trance or liberation, he does not get detached from nature, prakriti. When he renounces his full affinity for nature, he remains untainted while performing actions or not performing these. Seeing action in an action means, performing action or not performing it, by being detached, untainted. Worldly people want to gain something or the other, through performance and non-performance of actions, while a karmagi's only aim through the two, is the welfare of the world, by remaining detached. The Lord declares, for him there is no interest in what is done or what is not done. Gita 3:18. If he has any self-interest, he is not a karmagi, but is rather a doer of actions. So long as a striver assumes his affinity for nature, he holds that he progresses in the mundane sphere through the performance of actions, while in the spiritual sphere, through their non-performance. But, in fact, it is not so. As walking and eating etc. are actions of the physical body, so are reflection and meditation, the actions of the subtle body, and trance, the action of the causal body. Therefore, he who performs his duty, action, for the welfare of the world, by remaining detached, untainted, sees an action in action. The same has been pointed out, in the 48th verse of the 2nd chapter, by the Lord, when he declares, perform action, being steadfast in yoga, equanimity. Activity or non-activity with some motive in the world, are both actions. To remain quite detached, while doing actions or refraining from them throughout, and being detached, while there is performance or non-performance of actions, this total detachment under all circumstances, is called yoga, and is karmaga. A striver should remain equanimous, during the performance or non-performance of actions, called karmaga. Question: why has the Lord mentioned inaction and action and action in inaction, while in both cases, inaction or detachment, is the predominating factor? Answer: when a man sees inaction in action, there remains the dominance of detachment. But, when he sees action in inaction, there is predominance of performance or non-performance of action. It means that detachment has its affinity for the self, while performance or non-performance of actions has its affinity for the world, including the body. Therefore, detachment is one's own duty, while performance or non-performance of action is the duty of another. In order to differentiate the two, the Lord has mentioned seeing inaction in action and action in inaction. In the discipline of action, there is performance or non-performance of action, for the welfare of the world without attachment, because, while performing actions, one should remain detached, and while remaining detached, one should perform actions. These two aspects are the principles of the Gita: pravritti, activity, and nivritti, non-activity. Both are in domain of nature. Nature is ever-changing, and so is performance or non-performance of actions, while the self, which is the illuminator and base of the two, ever remains uniform without undergoing any modification. In order to explain this fact, the Lord has declared that he who sees inaction in action, and action in inaction both is wise. It means that a striver, while remaining established in the self, should perform actions for the welfare of the world, viz., as a sacrifice, yajna. The striver, who sees inaction in action and action in inaction, i.e., remains detached, untainted, and knows the truth about action. Unless he is detached, i.e., regards objects and actions as his, and for him, it means that he has not known the reality about actions. In order to know the truth about God, a striver has to identify the self with him, while in order to know the reality about the world, he has to separate the self from the world, actions and objects, for he, the self, has identity with God, while he is different from the world. All actions are transitory while the self is eternal. As a common man cannot remain unsoiled in a coal cellar, only a wise man could do so. Similarly, only a wise man can remain detached from actions, while performing these. Therefore, here as well as in the 10th verse of the 18th chapter, the Lord calls such a man wise among men. He wants to say that for such a wise man, nothing further remains to be known. Sayukta, a karmagi, remains equanimous in success and failure, because he totally renounces the desire for the fruit of actions. Here the term yoga stands for equanimity. One is a yogi, because he remains established in equanimity. Every being has a natural union with God, but he forgets it, because he assumes his affinity for the world. When he performs actions for the welfare of the world, by renouncing desire for fruit, a sense of possession and attachment, his assumed affinity for the world is renounced, and he realizes his union with God, which is natural and eternal. For such a yogi nothing remains to be attained, for he has achieved divinity. Kritsna karma krit. So long as a man has to attain something or the other, he has to perform actions, viz., his attachment for actions does not wither. Perishable actions bear perishable fruits. So long as one has desire for the perishable, he will have to undertake actions. But, on having renounced all affinity for the perishable, he attains to the imperishable Lord, and nothing further remains to be done. Then, A karmagi has nothing to do with the performance or non-performance of actions, i.e., he becomes a performer of all actions. When nothing remains to be done, to be known and to be attained by such a karmagi, he is liberated from the evil bondage of the wheel of birth and death in the world. Gita 4:16, 32. Appendix. There are two spheres, one of action and the other of inaction. Out of these two, inaction is the essence. Therefore he who sees inaction in action viz., while performing an action remains untainted, and he who sees action in inaction viz., while remaining untainted performs action, for him nothing remains to be done, to be known and to be gained. As at the beginning of an action gained Saji is worshipped, but during the performance of the action gained Saji is not worshipped all the time. But it is not the case here of remaining untainted in actions at the beginning only. Therefore the Lord has mentioned inaction in action and action in inaction. It means that one should never be tainted, desire for fruit and the sense of doership, viz., he should ever remain untainted. In the 8th verse of the 3rd chapter the Lord declares that the performance of an action is superior to inaction karma jyo hi akarmana, while here he declares that it is better to see inaction, non-doership, than the performance of action, and for the person who is thus untainted, nothing remains to be done, to be known and to be gained. It proves that a man should be free from the desire for fruit and from the sense of doership, because these two severely bind a man. Link now. The Lord in the next two verses describes the enlightened soul, sage, who sees inaction in action and action in inaction, i.e., who knows the truth about action. He, all whose undertakings are free from sankalpa and desire and whose actions are burnt up in the fire of wisdom, him the seers call wise. Pandita 19. Comment. Thinking of sense objects and remembering these time and again, and thinking that some of these are good, useful and pleasurable, is a mental resolve. Sankalpa and Vikalpa, uncertainty, is antithesis of Sankalpa. These are not good and are injurious. This type of thinking, the Vikalpa intellect, is the abiding place of positive and negative projections. When negative projections give way to positive ones, at that time a desire to obtain those objects arises. This is known as kama. In an accomplished karmagi, projection and desire, both are absent. For example, there remains neither sankalpa, which is the origin of desire, nor desire, which is its product. Therefore, all actions of a karmagi are free from resolve and desire. Sankalpa and desire are the two seeds of action. If they are no longer there, action becomes inaction, that is to say, actions lose their binding potentiality. In a liberated soul, these two are absent, so actions performed by that are not binding. Even though he does everything in order to maintain social order and protect the chain of social obligations, yet he is quite untainted with his actions whatsoever. The Lord has prescribed on occasions the renunciation of desires, 6:4, of mental projections, 255, and of both these, 6:24-25. Therefore, wherever in Gita renunciation of sankalpa is prescribed, it must always be together with desire as well. In a nutshell, a striver should give up projections and desires both. There are 4 states of a motor car. 1. When a motor car stands still, in the garage, its engine does not function and the wheels don't move forward. 2. The engine starts functioning, but the wheels do not move forward, it's all loss and no gain. 3. The engine functions and the wheels move and cover some distance. 4. On a downward slope, the engine is stopped, while the wheels move and cover a distance, it's all gain and no cost. Similarly, a man may have 4 states: 1. Neither desire, nor action. 2. Desire but no action, it's all loss and no gain. 3. Desire as well as action. 4. Action, but no desire, it's all gain and no cost. The best state of a motor car is the 4th one, when the car runs, but no petrol is consumed. Similar is the case with man. The best state is when he performs action, without having any desire. Even the wise call such a man a sage. Samaramba. See here, this term stands for the undertaking of a karmagi, which are free from attachment and aversion. It does not stand for the word aramba, undertaking, used in the 12th verse of the 14th chapter, because their pravritti, activity, and aramba, 2 terms have been used. There, the term pravritti stands for the performance of duty, while the term aramba, stands for the undertaking of actions for pleasures and prosperity. A sage or an enlightened soul performs actions scrupulously according to the ordinance of the scriptures, for the welfare of all beings. The term sarv expresses the meaning that all his undertakings are free from the thought of the world and desire. From morning till night, whatever he does, for the maintenance of his body, such as washing, eating, walking etc., and for spiritual upliftment, such as chant, adoration, reflection, meditation and trance, is free from the thought of the world and desire. Jnanagnyadagdhyakramam wisdom consists in knowing the truth that actions have their affinity for the body and the world, not for the self, because actions have a beginning and an end, while the self remains stable. All actions are burnt in the fire of this wisdom, i.e., actions cannot bear fruit in the form of bondage. Gita 4:16-32. In fact, the body and actions have their identity with the world, while the self is different from these. But, by an error, he, the self, assumes his affinity for these. Great souls have no affinity for their so-called bodies. As actions are performed by the entire world, so are actions performed by their so-called bodies. Thus, when they are detached from actions, not only their present actions, but also the stock of past actions are burned in the fire of wisdom. As far as their fate, prarabdha karma, is concerned, it creates favorable and unfavorable circumstances, but being detached from the fruit of actions they neither feel happy nor sad. The prarabdha karmas get effaced by creating transitory circumstances. Tarnahupanyatambudam. It is easy to know the reality about an ascetic, who having renounced actions externally ever remains absorbed in the adoration of God, but it is very difficult to know the truth about a man living a householder's life who performs his duty scrupulously without being attached to actions, in the least. The sages also declare, those who have renounced the world, enlighten others, and everyone knows them. But a householder saint is rarely known. As a lotus leaf, in spite of being born in water and living constantly in touch with it, is not tainted by water, so does a karmagi, in spite of being born in a life of action, human life, and in spite of living in this world of actions, while performing actions, does not get attached to these. Detachment from actions is not an easy task. Therefore, the Lord, in the 18th verse, has called him wise among men, while here he declares that the wise call him a sage. It means that such a karmagi is the wisest among the wise. One having abandoned attachment to actions and their fruit, ever content, without any kind of dependence, he does nothing even though fully engaged in action. 20 Comment Tyact Vikarmaphalazangam. If a man thinks that he is the doer while performing action, regards the body and the senses etc. as his, considers the action as his end for him and expects its fruit, then he becomes the cause of fruit of action. But an enlightened soul totally renounces his affinity for the mundane materials, and so he is not, in the least, attached to materials for action, to action and to the fruits of action. Thus, he does not become the cause of the fruit of action. As an army fighting under the guidance of a king, with material supplied by him, gains victory over an enemy, but the credit for the victory goes to the king. Similarly, a soul attached to the body, senses, mind and intellect etc., is held responsible for the fruit of actions performed by these. Even renunciation of actions of a deluded person is conducive to action, while even performance of actions of a wise man leads to actionlessness. Astavakarglata 1861. A great soul, having not the least attachment for actions, and material for actions, is not attached to the fruit of actions. In fact, the self has no attachment for actions and their fruits, because it is sentient, imperishable and unaltered, while actions and their fruits are insentient, perishable and undergo modifications. But when it assumes its affinity, by an error, for them, it is bound. If it renounces this assumed affinity, it will realize its detachment from actions, and their fruits. Nayarasri Tilda. Even a king or an emperor has to depend on circumstances, time, objects and persons etc. But an enlightened soul does not depend on these, because having realized the self or God, he remains satisfied in the self, whether he acquires anything or not. The soul, being a fragment of God, is real, and the real never ceases to be. Gita 2:16. But when it assumes its affinity for the unreal, it feels a deficiency. In order to compensate for the shortage, it has a desire for worldly objects. It is satisfied by acquiring the objects, but that satisfaction is temporary as the objects are perishable. How could the unreal satisfy the real? Therefore, so long as the soul assumes its affinity for the perishable actions and objects, and depends on these, it does not realize the satisfaction automatic, which is eternal. The same eternal satisfaction has been referred in the 17th verse of the 3rd chapter, by the expression atmatripta, satisfied with the self. The term abhipravrta means that all actions are scrupulously performed by emancipated soul, because he is not at all attached to actions and their fruits. All his actions are performed for the welfare of the world. He who is attached to the fruit of action cannot perform actions scrupulously, because a lot of his energy is wasted by thinking of the fruit. The term API, even or though, means that such an enlightened soul does not perform an action at all, though he is fully engaged in action. It is because of his detachment that all his actions change into inaction. When he does nothing, how could he be bound by the fruit of actions? Therefore, the Lord, in the 12th verse of the 18th chapter, declares that a karmagi, who has renounced the fruit of action, does not reap the fruit of action, i.e., becomes free from the bondage of action. Prakriti, nature, is ever active. Therefore, so long as a man has affinity for the modes of nature, actions and objects, he gets attached to them, even without performing action. If he has no affinity, attachment, for the modes of nature, he does nothing, even though he is ever engaged in action, as all his actions are performed for the welfare of the world. Appendix. So long as a man has the sense of doership, during the performance of action or non-performance of action, he remains a doer. But when the sense of doership is wiped out, he does nothing at all, or his action or inaction never comes under the category of action at all. Link. Having described the detachment of an enlightened soul, in the 19th and the 20th verses, now the Lord, in the 21st verse, describes the detachment of a striver who does not perform duties enjoined by the scriptures, while, in the 22nd verse, he describes the detachment of a striver who performs his duties, having no desires, with his mind and body fully subdued, giving up all attachments and possessions, even though performing action necessary for the maintenance of the body. A karmagi incurs no sin. 21. A man cannot keep his body, senses, mind and the self under control, because of hope or desire. When he has no hope or desire, his body, senses and mind etc. automatically remain under his control, and then no futile action is performed by him. If a karmagi is a recluse, he renounces all worldly possessions. But, if he is a householder, he does not accumulate any worldly object to derive pleasure out of it. He, by regarding it as the world's, uses it in rendering service to the world. It is inevitable for every striver not to hanker after mundane pleasure. This is the only verse in the whole of Gita where there is description of renunciation of all worldly possessions. In the 10th verse of the 6th chapter, there is an explanation of the renunciation of possessions for a yogi who practices meditation, while in the 53rd verse of the 18th chapter, there is an account of the renunciation of possession for a yogi who has attained the supreme state of knowledge. But here, in this verse, renunciation is superior to those renouncements, because only here, the adjective sarva, all, has been used with parigraha, possessions. The term, aniketa, homeless or having no fixed abode, has been used, for freedom from attachment to the abode, in the 19th verse of the 12th chapter, for a bhakti-yogi. Nirasiha karmagi, has no hope, no desire and no lust. He does not hanker after worldly pleasure and prosperity. Even if he is not able to renounce his hope or desire totally, he aims at their renunciation. Sariram kevalam karmakurv. And the actions expressed in this term may be of two kinds, I. Actions which are undertaken by the body, and 2. Actions which are performed for the maintenance of the body. The former have been described in the 11th verse of the 5th chapter, when the Lord declares, men of action having abandoned attachment, perform actions only with the body, mind, intellect or even with the senses, for the purification of the self. But, this verse is pertaining to detachment of the striver, who does not even perform duties enjoined by the scriptures. Therefore, Here it is used in the latter sense, i.e., actions, as eating, drinking, bathing, washing, etc., which are necessary for the bare maintenance of the body, are performed by a man of action, who has abandoned attachment. Napnati kilbism, he who is attached to the performance or non-performance of action, in the least, incurs sin, i.e., follows the cycle of birth and death. But the man of action, being free from hope or desire, is not attached to the performance or non-performance of action, so he incurs no sin. All his actions change into inactions. Such a karmagi, man of action, does not indulge in indolence and heedlessness. These two are also enjoyments. Lying idly in the lonely place is an enjoyment, and indulgence in useless and forbidden actions is also an enjoyment. Through such indulgences, a man enjoys himself, thus he incurs sins. But a karmagi, who is given to performing some action, does not indulge in indolence and heedlessness. His mind, senses and body are under his control. Moreover, he is free from hope, desire and a sense of possession, etc. So, forbidden actions cannot be performed by him, and thus he incurs no sin. Had he indulged in indolence and heedlessness in the least, it could not be said of him that he incurs no sin. Now a doubt arises, why it has been said that he incurs no sin, when forbidden actions cannot be performed by him. The clarification is, that all undertakings are enveloped by defects, sins. The Lord declares, all undertakings are clouded by defects, as fire by smoke. Gita 18:48. The root of sins is desire or a sense of mind or attachment. A karmagi, man of action, is free from desire, sense of mind and attachment, or he has such a name, so he has nothing to do with the performance or non-performance of action. Therefore, he does not incur incidental sin during the performance of his duty, nor does he incur sin by the renunciation of his duty, enjoined by the scriptures. A second doubt may arise here, that the Lord has directed even a wise man, who has attained perfection, to perform action for the welfare of the world. 3:25-26. The Lord has also declared, there is nothing in the three worlds that should be done by me, nor is there anything unattained that should be attained, yet I engage myself in action. Gita 3:22-24. Therefore, will a karmagi, who does not engage himself in action for the welfare of the world, not incur sin? The clarification is, that he will incur no sin, because he is free from desire, attachment, etc., and a sense of mind. Though the Lord and wise men, enlightened souls, are totally free from desire and attachment, etc., yet out of compassion, grace, they perform actions for the welfare of the world, even when it is not obligatory for them. Gita 3:18. Such ascetic karmajas, as described in the verse, are also ideal for ascetic strivers of karmagan and are automatically a source of inspiration for strivers and common folk. The third doubt that arises is that the Lord, in the 13th verse of the 3rd chapter, declared, those wicked people who prepare food for their own sake, verily ate sin, while here, he declares that he who performs action for the mere maintenance of body incurs no sin. Thus there seems to be a contradiction. The clarification is, that so long as there is desire for pleasure as well as attachment to actions and materials, he incurs sins, whether he performs actions or does not perform these. But when he becomes free from desire and attachment, he incurs no sin. Question: can this verse not be included in the verses pertaining to the discipline of knowledge, as these reflect the marks of a man of knowledge? Answer: the first point is, that here the context is of kanaga. Secondly, a jnani, liberated soul, holds that he does nothing at all, Gita 5:8, i.e., he sees an action in action. So it cannot be said about him, that he incurs no sin while performing action, because he does not think he is a doer or he performs any action at all. Though in the striver, who follows the path of action, discrimination is not clearly revealed, yet he has a determinate intellect about three facts: that nothing is his, nothing is required for him, and nothing is to be done for him. Having resolved this, he remains detached from actions in spite of performing these. Generally, people believe that a karmagi leads the life of a householder, while a jnanagi follows the renounced order. But, in fact, it is not so. A jnanagi, man of knowledge, is he who can discriminate between self and body, whether he leads the life of a householder or of a renounced order. But He who cannot discriminate self from the body, despite a determinate intellect about above-mentioned three facts, is only a karmagi, whether he is a householder or is of a renounced order. Content with what comes to him without desire for fruit, free from antithetic influence and envy, even-minded in success and failure, even though performing action, he, karmagi, is not bound by these. 22 Comment: a karmagi performs action scrupulously without expecting any fruit. As he has no desire for fruit of action, he remains even-minded in success and failure, profit and loss, honor and dishonor and praise and blame, etc. He remains equanimous in all favorable and unfavorable circumstances, without feeling happy or sad. He has knowledge of profit and loss, and accordingly, he makes wise efforts also. But, in effect, he feels neither happy nor sad. Even if evenness of mind is lost, a shiver should not lose heart, because the disturbance of mind is short-lived and disappears quickly. The term labha denotes profit as well as loss, agreeable as well as disagreeable, whatsoever is obtained. A karmagi identifies himself with all beings. He realizes his self as the self, in all beings. Gita 5:7. So he is not at all envious of any being. A karmagi is very cautious lest he should be envious of any being, because all his actions are performed for the welfare of the world. If he is envious of anyone in the least, his undertakings cannot be for the welfare of the world. Envy is a subtle evil. Even neighboring businessmen, friends and members of a family, are seen getting envious of each other, because of each other's good fortune. Where there are antagonistic feelings, this evil is found in abundance. Therefore, a striver should be on his guard against this evil. A karmagi transcends the pairs of opposites, such as profit and loss, honor and dishonor, praise and blame, pleasure and pain, and desirable and undesirable circumstances. So, he has a balanced state of mind, free from attachment and aversion, etc. Similarly, there can be the influence of the opposites in beliefs. One may believe in the Lord, who is endowed with form and attributes, while the other may believe in the Lord who is formless and without attribute. One may believe in the dualistic principle, while the other in the non-dualistic principle. Whether mind is absorbed in God or not, whether seclusion is procured or not, whether peace is attained or not, and whether success is achieved or not, a striver is free from all such pairs of opposites, like a balance which remains steady when there is equal weight on either side. A karmagi, free from the pairs of opposites, is easily released from the bondage of the world. Gita 5:3. He remains even-minded in accomplishment or non-accomplishment of the work and for getting or not getting its fruit in success and failure, pleasure and pain, without having attachment or aversion for them. The same evenness of mind by the expression has been pointed out here as well as in the 48th verse of the second chapter. When a shiver realizes the three facts, that nothing is his, nor is for him, and nothing is to be done for him, he attains a state of total evenness of mind. Kritvapi nanabadit. When a karmagi is not bound, even while acting, there is no question of his being bound without acting. He remains free from attachment in these two states. As a karmagi who performs action merely for the maintenance of the body, is not bound, so is a karmagi who performs actions sanctioned by the scriptures, not bound. In fact, it is neither performance nor non-performance of actions which binds a man, but it is attachment to these which binds him. Similarly, it is detachment which liberates him from bondage. A karmagi, like an actor, plays his part according to his caste and order of life, and being detached from them, he is not at all attached to the changing nature, prakriti. He remains established in the eternal self. Therefore, he automatically remains even-minded, and thus is not bound by actions even while performing these. If a serious thought is given, it becomes clear that equanimity is natural. Everyone knows that he remains the same in both favorable and the unfavorable circumstances. It means that circumstances change, but he, the self, remains the same. However, we commit an error, that keep an eye on circumstances, but we do not watch the self. Consequently, we feel happy or sad. Link. The Lord, in the first half of the 9th verse of the 3rd chapter, by a negative inference, declared, the mankind is bound by actions other than those performed for the sake of sacrifice. He describes the same fact, by a positive inference, in the next verse. All actions of a man, who is devoid of attachment, who is liberated, whose mind is established in knowledge of the self, who works for the sake of sacrifice, yajna, are destroyed. 23. Comment. This verse is an important one about the discipline of action, because only here it is mentioned that all actions of a karmagi are destroyed. Similarly, the 36th verse of the 4th chapter is an important verse on the discipline of knowledge, while the 66th verse of the 18th chapter is an important verse on the discipline of devotion. Gatasya attachment to actions, objects, incidents, circumstances and persons leads to bondage, i.e., the cause of birth of the soul in good and evil bodies. Gita 13:21. When a man performs actions for the welfare of the world, without any selfish motive, he becomes free from attachment for actions and objects. In fact, a man, the self, is inherently detached. Brihadaranyaka 4:3-15. But in spite of being detached, he gets attached to the body, senses, mind, intellect, objects, circumstances, and men, etc., by regarding these as his own, and is thus bound by desire for pleasure. So long as he wants to satiate his desire, his attachment is enhanced. In fact, whatever is to happen, will happen, and whatever is not to happen will not happen, whether one desires it or not. Therefore, he who has any desire, gets entangled in vain, and has to suffer pain. A karnagi, considering the acquired things of the world, neither of his own nor for himself, utilizes these in rendering service to the world. Thus the flow of things and actions is towards the world, and the self remains the same, as it is, non-attached. He has no egoistic notion of rendering service to others because he thinks that he has discharged his debt by returning thing to the one to whom it belonged. If egoistic notion subsists, it binds a karmagi. It subsists only when he considers the materials for service as his own. When the subtle egoistic notion is rooted, then only pure service remains. Moreover, he does not expect any reward, in the form of money, honor, praise, position and authority, etc., because he does not lay claim to these. He wants neither to be called a generous man, nor gets pleased if praised by calling him generous, or derives pleasure out of his act of service. By doing selfless service, he gets placidity of mind. If that placidity is not enjoyed, he automatically realizes axiomatic detachment. Muktasya man, the soul, in spite of being different from actions and objects, such as the body, etc., assumes these as his own, because of desire, attachment and a sense of mine, and is thus bound. By following the discipline of action, when the assumed affinity is renounced, the karmagi becomes detached. This detachment leads him to liberation. He, who ever remains conscious of the self, has his mind ever established in its knowledge. When he becomes conscious of the self, he gets established in the self. In fact, he had already been established in the self, but he only now realizes the fact. In fact, knowledge is gained of the world, rather than of the self, because the self is an embodiment of knowledge. The world consists of actions and objects. The self, being sentient, is different from insentient actions and objects. The self is their illuminator. As soon as a striver realizes this fact, his affinity for actions and objects is renounced, and he realizes that he is, naturally, established in the detached self. Karma samagram pravilayate. One form of seeing in action is to work for the sake of sacrifice, yajna. Performance of actions for the welfare of others, without a selfish motive, is called yajna, sacrifice. He, who works for the sake of sacrifice, gets liberated, while he, who performs actions other than those that are performed for the sake of sacrifice, is bound. Gita 3:9. Actions and objects are the evolutes of nature, prakriti. Both of them have a beginning and an end, i.e., they are perishable. They neither existed before they were seen, nor will exist when they have gone. It means that in the middle, they merely seem to exist, but actually they do not exist, as it is a rule that whatever does not exist at the beginning and at the end, also does not exist in the middle, at present. But the self, the illuminator of objects and action, is sentient and remains stable. Though it has no affinity for objects and actions, when it assumes its affinity for them, it is bound. The method by which to be liberated from this bondage is to work for the welfare of others, without having any selfish desire for fruit. In the world, there are innumerable objects and undertakings, which one assumes as his own. By having attachment, desire and a sense of mind for these he gets bound. When having renounced attachment, desire and a sense of mind, he renders service with them, regarding them as of others. All his actions, of past as well as present, are dissolved, and he realizes his natural detachment. An important fact: 1. An agent, an instrument and action are the threefold basis of action. Gita 18:18. Out of the three, the real basis is the agent, because the instrument and the action depend on the agent. If we give a serious thought to the topic, we come to realize that a desire to act arises only when we have a desire to acquire something or the other. The desire to act makes us an agent, or a doer. This sense of doership binds a man. When a man performs an action with the desire to acquire anything, his sense of doership is strengthened. But, when a karmagi, without having any desire to acquire anything, works for the sake of sacrifice, i.e., for the welfare of others, his doership is utilized for the welfare of others, and he realizes that he is detached from actions and objects, etc. His actions are not accumulated, as in the absence of doership, all his actions are neutralized. In the discipline of action, renunciation of a sense of mind is important, while in the discipline of knowledge, renunciation of egoism is important. If a striver renounces one of these, the other is automatically renounced. In the discipline of action, first there is renunciation of a sense of mind, and then renunciation of egoism naturally follows, while in the discipline of knowledge, the order is reversed. In absence of ness and mindness, the doership and enjoyership both melt away. When a man of action has neither a sense of doership, nor has any desire, he has not to reap the fruit of action, in the same way as a criminal has not to suffer torture or punishment if he dies. When a person does not want to reap the fruit of his actions, all his actions are dissolved. 2. In the 9th verse of this chapter, the Lord declared, "He who thus knows, in their true nature, my divine birth and action, comes to me." The birth can be divine only of the Lord, but actions of men can also be divine. In the 14th verse of this chapter, the Lord declares that his actions are divine, as he has no desire for the fruit of actions, and thus he is not bound by them, i.e., his actions change into an action. In this way, if a striver also performs actions without expecting the fruit of actions, his actions also change into an action. Then, in the 15th verse, he declares, having known this, men who sought liberation also performed actions. In the 16th verse, he resolves to teach the reality about action, while in the 17th verse, he declares that one should understand the true nature of action, of forbidden action and of inaction. In the 18th verse, he declares that he who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is wise among men. Desire is the known root of actions. When desire is enhanced, forbidden actions are performed, but when desire is renounced, actions are changed into inaction. The main purpose of the Lord is to describe an action, from the 16th to the 32nd verse. Therefore, he has described renunciation of desire, which is the root of actions, and forbidden actions in each of the verses from the 19th to the 23rd, along with inaction, and the topic has been concluded in the 32nd verse. Examples of the renunciation of desires: devoid of desires, 4L9, having abandoned attachment to the fruit of action, 420, having no hope or desire, 421, satisfied with what comes to him by chance, 422, and devoid of attachment, 423. Examples of inaction: actions have been burnt by the fire of knowledge, 4L9, he does nothing thought engaged in action, 420, while performing actions he incurs no sin, 4121, though acting he is not bound, 422, the whole action is dissolved, 423. Appendix 1 is kriya, 1 is karma, and 1 is kanaga. The body passes from babyhood to youth and from youth to old age. This is kriya. By this kriya man neither incurs sin nor virtue, it neither leads him to salvation nor to bondage. Similarly, the flow of the river Ganges is mira kriya. If a man gets drowned in its current, or it may prove helpful in farming, etc., The Ganges does not incur any sin or virtue. When a man by assuming affinity with Kriya becomes a doer of his, he does Kriya for himself, then this Kriya bears fruit and it becomes karma, action. Karma leads to bondage, Gita 3:9. In order to be free from the bondage of actions, when a man does nothing for himself but works for the welfare of others in a disinterested way, it is karmaga. By karmaga bondage for actions is destroyed. With the annihilation of bondage yoga is attained, viz. Eternal union with God is realized. This 23rd verse is the main verse of karmaga, as the Lord by the expression Jnanagna Sarva Karmani Bhasmasad Kurut, Gita 4:37, has declared that the fire of knowledge reduces all actions to ashes, and by the expression Hamtvo Sarvapapabhyo Moksayasiyami Arane Sukha, 1866, he has declared he will liberate a devotee from all sins. Similarly, in this verse he has declared by the expression Yajñakirota Karma Samagaran Pravilayate that all the actions including past ones of a karmagi melt away. Linky L. In the preceding verse, the Lord declared, all actions of a man, who works for the sake of sacrifice, are dissolved. The term sacrifice, in this context, stands for duty, according to a person's caste and order of life, etc. Therefore, the Lord, in the next 7 verses, explains several forms of sacrifice as duties, for the strivers, according to their inclination, faith and qualification. For him, the ladle with which yajna offering is made is Brahmana. The fire and the act of offering oblation is also God. By God, as offerer of sacrifice, is the oblation poured into the fire of God. God shall be attained by him who is absorbed in God, in the act of such sacrifice. Yajna. 24. Comment. Oblation is important in sacrifice. The oblation becomes one with fire. When it is poured into fire, it has no separate existence of its own. Similarly, when all the means of God realization have no existence apart from God, these become sacrifice. To perceive God in all sacrifices is to see reality, as it is not a conception. Actually, objects are not real, and to visualize these as real is an error. All the sacrifices described, from the 24th verse to the 30th verse, are included in karmaga, because the Lord at the beginning of this context declared, I shall teach thee what action is, the nature of action and inaction, knowing which, thou shalt be delivered from evil. 4:16. At the end, he declared, know all sacrifices as born of action, and thus knowing, thou shalt be liberated. 4:32. In the middle, also he declared, to one who works for the sake of sacrifice, the whole action is dissolved. 4:23. The important factor is that all actions of a person, who performs them for the sake of sacrifice, are changed into inaction. Therefore, in all these sacrifices, there is a description of inaction in action. The ladle, with which an oblation is poured into the fire, has been called arpat. That is God. Sesame seed, barley and ghee, which are poured as oblation into fire, are also God. He, who performs the sacrifice, is God. Gita 1312. The fire into which the oblation is poured, is God. And the act of pouring oblation, is also God. Just as person while offering sacrifice, looks at the ladle, the sacrificial oblation, and fire etc., as Brahma, similarly in every action, he who regards the doer, the action, the instrument and matter as Brahma, for him all actions are Brahma and thus he is merged in Brahma. When he views everything as no other than God, he attains him. Cultured people recite this verse while having meals, so this activity may be changed into a sacrifice. Yajna. When a striver has his meal, he beholds God, in the following way, I, the hand, with which the food is put into the mouth, is God. With hands and feet everywhere, he exists. Gita 13:3. 2. The food is God. I am the melted butter. Gita 9:16. 3. He who eats the food, is also God. The soul is a fragment of mind. Gita 1517. 4. The fire, that abides in the stomach, and by which food is digested, is also God. I am the fire, lodged in the body of all creatures. Gita 15:14. The action of offering food, to the fire, which abides in the stomach, is also God. I am the offering. Gita 9:16. The fruit of eating, the remnants, residual food, of the sacrifice, is also God. Those who eat the sacred food that remains, after a sacrifice, attain to the eternal absolute. 431. A vital fact. The world, which is an evolute of nature, Prakriti, is in fact, seen in the form of objects and actions. The world, in the form of objects and actions, is ever-changing and ever undergoes modifications. But, due to attachment, we do not perceive the changing nature of objects. We perceive these chiefly as objects. All objects and activities are going to naught. Therefore, the world is practically a naught. There is existence only of the transcendental absolute. In fact, the world does not exist, but it seems to exist in the light of the eternal absolute. The non-existence of the world is explained below. The world appears in three states: birth, life and death. But, actually there is no life. What seems life, is nothing but the process from birth to death. A man, or an object, starts to die the day he is born. Though it is said that he is born, he lives and he dies. If a man has to live alive say for 50 years and he is 20 years old, it means that he has to be alive only for 30 years, i.e., he has died 40%, and his life remains only 60%. In fact, he is dying every moment. The seen is changing into the unseen. But the world seems to exist in the light of the Absolute who is eternal. Lord Krishna declares, all is God. Gita 7:19, Chandogya 3:14-1. Some yogis offer sacrifice to God alone while others offer the self as sacrifice by the sacrifice of discrimination in the fire of the Supreme. 25. Comment in the preceding verse, the Lord described a striver who beholds God in all objects and actions. Here, by using the term apare, he describes strivers who perform sacrifice, but who are different from those mentioned in the preceding verse. Here the term yojana stands for those strivers who perform actions without expecting any reward. Those who, instead of regarding actions and objects as theirs and for them, regard these as the Lord's and for him, perform sacrifice to God, as he is the Lord, even of the gods. Therefore, those persons who, without having the least attachment, a sense of mind and desire for objects and actions, hold that they are only of the Lord, perform sacrifice to him. The term apare has been used to bring out the distinction between sacrifice mentioned in the first half of this verse and the second half. When the soul identifies itself with matter, it becomes an embodied soul. But when a person, the soul, by discrimination, having a total disinclination for matter, merges in God, i.e., has not the least separate existence apart from God, it is called sacrifice. Appendix: the expression may also mean other yogis in order to serve Brahma. The embodied world perform duty sacrifice for the sacrifice in the form of welfare of others, viz., they perform all actions for the welfare of others. Gita 3:9, 423. Some offer hearing and other senses as sacrifice into the fire of restraint. Others offer sound and other objects of senses into the fire of senses. 26. Comment here, the offer of senses into the fires of restraint has been called sacrifice. It means that some do not allow the senses ear, eye, skin, tongue, and nose to incline towards the sensual objects of sound, sight, touch, taste and smell. They constantly restrain their senses. The senses, the mind, the intellect and the ego, are said to be under complete restraint when these are totally free from attachment. Gita 2:58-59, 68. Sound, sight, touch, taste and smell are the five sensual objects. The discipline in which these objects of sense are offered in the fire of sense becomes a sacrifice. It means that even when the objects of senses come in contact with senses, the senses remain free from attraction and repulsion, or attachment and aversion. Gita 2:64-65. In both the sacrifices mentioned in this verse, perfection or God realization is attained when there is total absence of attachment. This process, of two kinds as sacrifice, has been described in order to root out attachment. In the first one, a striver controls his senses in solitude, through discrimination, chant and meditation etc. When there is full restraint, he becomes free from attachment and then he remains equable, both in loneliness, as well as in practical life. In the second case, a striver in his practical life, moves about among sense objects with the mind, intellect and ego and the senses, free from attraction and repulsion, i.e., attachment and aversion. When he becomes free from attachment, he remains the same, both in loneliness and practical life. Some others again, offer sacrifice with the functions of the senses and those of the breath, vital energy, into the fire of yoga of self-restraint, kindled by knowledge. 27 Comment in this verse, a trance, concentration of the mind on God or the self, has been called a form of sacrifice. It means that in the state of trance, when the yogi concentrates his mind on God, his senses, sense organs and organs of action, cease to function. These become calm. When a yogi concentrates his mind on God, the function of the breath is offered, sacrificed, i.e., the breath also ceases to function. In the state of trance, breath ceases to function, in two ways. The first is by breath control, in which breath is suspended. By practice, it can be suspended for hours and then for days, together. By this process of restraining breath, the duration of life is lengthened, in the same way as the age of a frog is lengthened. When it rains, sand also flows with water. A frog is embedded by that sand. When the sand dries, the frog remains there and its breath ceases to function. But when it rains again next year, in the rainy season, it comes back to life. In the second way, the mind is concentrated on God or the self, and when the mind is totally concentrated, breathing automatically stops. Both the trance and sleep have their affinity for the causal body. Therefore, both of these appear to be of the same state. Here, by the expression jnanadipide, kindled by knowledge, the Lord explains that there is a vast difference between the two. In the state of trance, the knowledge that God pervades everywhere remains kindled, while during slumber all his inclinations merge in ignorance. During trance, breath ceases to function, while during slumber, breath functions. In slumber, no trance is possible. The yogis, who concentrate their mind, sacrifice all the functions of senses and those of the breath, into the fire of the yoga of self-restraint, i.e., having suspended the function of all the senses, breath, mind and intellect, they get fixed in trance. In that state, all senses and breath cease to function and the consciousness of God, who is all truth, knowledge, bliss, remains fully awakened. Others again, offer as sacrifice, yajna, their wealth or their austerities or their yoga, while others with self-restraint and rigid vows, offer study of the scriptures and knowledge, as sacrifice, yajvaya. 28 Comment non-violence, truth, non-stealing, celibacy and to refrain from hoarding. These 5 are yama, the 5 great vows. These 5 vows have been very much eulogized in the scriptures. The aim of these vows is to enable a man to have disinclination for the world. The expression samsitavrta, persons of rigid vows, has been used for the strivers who fulfill these vows. Besides them, other strivers who perform the vows of the 4 other kinds of sacrifice mentioned in the verse are also persons of rigid vows. They have been called yataya, persons of self-restraint, because they, having self-restraint, make efforts in performing the sacrifice of their own choice and taste. The term yajna, sacrifice, has not been used with the expression samsitavrta, as it has been used with the other 14 as. Samsitavrta, person of rigid vows, has not been considered a separate sacrifice. Drave yajna, the sacrifice of wealth, includes the construction of wells, tanks, temples and inns, as well as offering of charity in the form of food, water, clothes, medicines and books, etc. Those who utilize their wealth and material possessions for the welfare of others, without any selfish motive, by regarding these as of others only, offer their wealth as sacrifice. To perform sacrifice, a man does not need to use anything more than what he actually possesses. As a person expects a child to perform only the action which he is capable of performing, so does the omniscient Lord and the world expect us to perform sacrifice, which we are capable of performing. Austerity as sacrifice consists in facing difficult and unfavorable circumstances, happily observing fast and keeping mum, etc., are also austerities as sacrifice. But the best sacrifice consists in the performance of one's duty happily, even in the most unfavorable circumstances, without the least deviation from it. Such austerity proves fruitful quickly. Rubbish may be harmful for health, but it works as a manure in farming. Similarly, unfavorable circumstances work as austerity, if the striver faces these happily. A man feels happy in favorable circumstances and feels unhappy in unfavorable circumstances, because of his attachment to pleasure. If he is not attached to pleasure, he can understand the merit of unfavorable circumstances. Here, the term yoga stands for equanimity, evenness of mind in success and failure, praise and blame, honor and dishonor and pleasure and pain, is called yogyajna. Yoga as sacrifice. In this sacrifice, a striver has neither attachment for favorable circumstances, nor aversion for unfavorable circumstances. Study of the scriptures, such as the Gita, the Ramayana, the Bhagavata, the Vedas and the Upanishads etc., as well as the study of one's own self and inclinations all constitute the holy sacrifice of knowledge. The Lord, while explaining the merit of the study of Gita declares, "He who studies this sacred dialogue, the Gita, of ours, by him, I would be worshipped through the sacrifice of knowledge." Gita 1870. It means that the study of Gita is a sacrifice of knowledge. He, who is lost in reflection of the gospel of the Gita and makes efforts to understand it, performs the sacrifice of knowledge. Others offer as sacrifice, yajna, the outgoing breath in the incoming, and the others in reverse is restraining the course of the outgoing and incoming breaths, solely absorbed in control of their breaths, pranayama. Others who regulate their diet, could offer the breath of life to the vital air, prana. All these are knowers of yajna and by that have their sins destroyed. 2930 Comment: Heart as the abode of outgoing. In this verse is one subject, others and one verb, sacrifice. Therefore, here restraint of birth includes inhalation, retention and exhalation of breath. Breath, while the seat of incoming breath, is anus. The yogis practice inhalation through the left nostril. That air having taken the life air which abides in the heart with it, passing through the navel merges with the incoming breath. This is called puraka, inhalation. When the outgoing and the incoming breaths are restrained, it is called kamaka, retention of breath. After that, the air from inside is exhaled through the right nostril. That air, having taken the outgoing and the incoming breaths, is exhaled. This is sacrifice of the outgoing breath. In the incoming breath, it is called rikaka, exhalation. Inhalation is practiced by uttering the name of the Lord 4 times, while retention of breath is practiced by uttering the same name 16 times, and exhalation is practiced by uttering the same name 8 times. Thus yogis, through the left nostril, practice inhalation, retention of breath and exhalation, and then, through the right nostril practice inhalation, retention of breath and exhalation. Repetition of this process is known as the sacrifice of restraint of the breath. When restraint of breath is practiced, in order to attain God, without expecting any other reward, all sins perish. Only those strivers, who regulate their diet can offer as sacrifice their life breaths, prana, for life breaths. He who eats too much or abstains too much from eating, cannot practice this restraint of breath. Gita 6:16-17. The sacrifice of life breaths, prana, by life breaths means, sacrifice of the incoming breath into the incoming breath and of the outgoing breath into the outgoing breath, i.e., the acts of inhalation and exhalation, both are suspended. This is called absolute restraint of the breath. Through this restraint of the breath, passions are naturally controlled and sins are destroyed. When this sacrifice is practiced, with the aim of God realization, it leads to the purification of the mind and then to God realization. The expression all these has been used for those strivers who perform sacrifice duties, as described from the 24th verse to the first half of the 30th verse. Performance of these sacrifices destroys their sins and leads them to God's realization. In fact, all sacrifices aim at the renunciation of affinity for actions. Those who know this fact are the real knowers of sacrifice. When affinity for actions is totally renounced, God is realized. Those who perform sacrifice, instead, for God realization, for acquiring pleasure here as well as hereafter, do not know the reality about sacrifice. It is desire for the perishable pleasures, which leads to bondage. The Lord declares, those who seek worldly enjoyment repeatedly go in return, Gita 9:21. Therefore, those who perform, even great sacrifices with worldly desires, have to follow the bondage of birth and death. An important fact during sacrifice Oblation is offered into fire. The oblation has different shapes. It loses its identity and becomes one with the fire. Similarly, when all the means of God realization, which have been described here as sacrifice, are offered to God, these lose their identity, and become one with God. If these retain their separate existence, it means that they have not been offered as sacrifice. The Lord started this topic of the reality of actions, seeing in action, from the 16th verse. The reality about actions is that he who performs actions as sacrifice, i.e., for the welfare of others, is not bound by them. As everything put into fire is burnt to ashes, so are actions, which are performed for the sake of sacrifice, dissolved entirely, i.e., are reduced to nothing. Gita 4:23. Day-to-day actions, performed for the welfare of others, without any selfish motive, lead to God realization. But, even virtuous actions, performed with a selfish motive, with the expectation of their fruits, cannot lead to God realization, because it is a desire for the perishable, which binds a man. So long as he assumes his affinity for the world, in the form of its materials and actions, he has attachment to acquire something and to do something. This attachment is called a desire to acquire and an urge to act. In fact, the real desire, need, of a man is to attain God, whose fragment he is. But he wants to satisfy this need by acquiring worldly objects because of his inclination for the world and disinclination for God. How can the perishable objects satisfy the imperishable fragment, the self, of the Lord? So long as he has an inclination for the world, he has a desire to acquire something or the other. In order to acquire it, he has to act. Thus, so long as he has a desire to acquire and an urge to act, viz., he has affinity with materials and actions, he has to follow the cycle of birth and death. How to get liberated from this cycle? One can be liberated from this cycle of birth and death when one performs actions for the welfare of others, without having any desire. This is called sacrifice or an ideal for others, or actions for the welfare of others. When actions are performed for the welfare of others, the affinity for the world is renounced, and a man gets detached from these. If actions are performed for the sake of the Lord, a striver's affinity for the world is renounced, he gets detached from actions, and he attains devotion to God, which is an uncommon trait of a striver. Appendix: performance of actions without any selfish motive, only for the welfare of others, is called yajna, sacrifice. By sacrifice all actions are transformed into an action, viz., they don't lead to bondage. There is mention of 12 kinds of sacrifice from the 24th verse to the 30th verse, and they are as follows. Verse I. Brahmayajna, realizing the doer, the action, the instrument and object, etc., and every action as Brahma. 2. Assuming all actions and objects only God's and only for him. 3. Having total disinclination for the unreal, merger in God, viz., having no independent existence of one's own apart from God. Performance of all actions for the welfare of others. 4. In loneliness, not to allow the senses to incline mentally towards the sensual objects. In day-to-day life, to keep the senses free from attachment and aversion even when the senses come in contact with sense objects. Gita 2:64-65. By restraining all the functions of the senses and breath to get established and transkindled by knowledge. 7. Utilization of all materials for the service of others in a selfless spirit. 8. Facing difficulties happily while discharging one's duty. 9. To remain equanimous in success and failure, in favorable and unfavorable circumstances. Study of the sacred scriptures and chanting the Lord's holy names, etc., for the good of others. 11. Control of breaths by puraka, inhalation, kamaka, retention, and rikaka, exhalation. 12. Fourth, by regulating the diet, suspension of the acts of inhalation and exhalation. All these mean that all our actions should be performed in the form of sacrifice, and then our life will be successful. It means that we have to do nothing for ourselves. We have no affinity fractions and objects. We have relationship with God, who is devoid of actions and objects. Link. The Lord, from the 24th verse to the first half of the 30th verse, described 12 kinds of sacrifice, while in the second half of the 30th verse, he eulogized strivers who perform sacrifices. Now, he in the next verse, explains what is gained through their performance and what is lost through their non-performance. Those who partake sacred remnants after a sacrifice, yajna, attain to the eternal absolute. Even this world is not pleasant for him who performs no sacrifice. How then can he have happiness in any other world? 0 Best of the Kuras, Arjuna. 31 Comment. Those who realize equanimity, having performed sacrifice, i.e., having performed a duty without any selfish motive, are said to have taken the remnant of the sacrifice. Such people are released from all sins, and attain to the eternal absolute. Gita 3:13. A man, the self, is eternal. It is because of his attachment to the perishable, that he believes that he dies. When he, having utilized his so-called possessions, for the welfare of the world, gets detached from them, he realizes the fact that he is eternal. When action is performed as duty, i.e., for the welfare of others without any selfish motive, it becomes a sacrifice, yajna. Action performed with a selfish motive leads to bondage. In a sacrifice, all possessions offered to others for his own self, he performs only action, which is inevitable for the bare maintenance of body. Gita 4121. Such an action is also included in sacrifice. This human body has been bestowed upon us, so that we may perform sacrifice. If we use it in order to gain honor, praise, comforts and luxuries etc., it leads us to bondage. But, if with it, actions are performed only for the sake of sacrifice, it leads to liberation and one attains to the eternal absolute. In the 8th verse of the 3rd chapter, the Lord declared, even the maintenance of the body would not be possible by inaction. Similarly, here he declares, this world is not felicitous for him who performs no sacrifice. How then can he have happiness in any other world? He who performs actions with a selfish motive disturbs peace, causes disorder and strife, and does not attain salvation. A selfish member, who does not perform his duty, is not liked even by members of one's family. Non-performance of duty causes quarrels, strifes and annoyance in the family. He who wants to lead a peaceful life in the family, should perform his duty by rendering service to other members of the family. By doing so, he becomes a source of inspiration for others and thus unity and peace prevail, in the family and in the world, here as well as hereafter. On the other hand, he who does not perform his duty scrupulously, does not lead a happy life, here as well as hereafter. Link in the 16th verse of this chapter. The Lord promised to explain the truth about actions. Having described it in detail, now he concludes the topic. Thus, many forms of sacrifice have been described in detail in the Vedas. Know them all as born of action, and having known these as such, thou shalt be liberated from the bondage of action. 32 Comment. Besides the 12 forms of sacrifice, which have been described, from the 24th verse to the 30th verse, there are many other forms of sacrifice, which have been explained in detail, in the Vedas. The reason is, that according to their inclination, nature and faith, strivers follow different spiritual disciplines. In the Vedas, there is description of self-centered rituals which people perform, in order to reap their perishable fruit. So, they go to heaven and enjoy divine pleasures of the gods, there. But, having enjoyed them, when fruits of their virtuous deeds are exhausted, they return to the world of mortals, and these follow the cycle of birth and death. Gita 9:21. Self-centered rituals are not enunciated here. But, here is an outline of selfless sacrifice, by performing which a striver attains to the eternal absolute. Gita 4:31. In the Vedas, there is not only the description of the means of enjoying heavenly pleasures, but there is also reference to spiritual practice, such as hearing of Vedic texts, cognition, reflection on what is heard, constant musing, constant and profound meditation, restraint of breath and trance, superconscious state, as the means of God realization. These have been mentioned here, in this verse. In the 14th and the 15th verses of the 3rd chapter, the Lord declares, sacrifice is born of the Veda, and the omnipresent God ever abides in sacrifice. We should resort to such sacrifice only for God realization. The expression, Tansarvan, the all, has been used for all the 12 sacrifices, described from the 24th to the 30th verse here, as well as different forms of sacrifice described in the Vedas. The expression Karmajanvidi, born of action, means that all forms of sacrifice are born of actions. Activities undertaken with the body, words uttered with the mouth and thoughts of the mind, are all included in actions. The Lord declares, whatever action a man performs, that is undertaken by the body, speech or mind. Gita 18:15. Arjuna wants to attain salvation, but he wants to renounce his duty of fighting, by regarding it as a sin. Therefore, the Lord, by using the expression karmajanviti, explains to him that whatever spiritual practice he will do by renouncing war, will also be the performance of action. The Lord declares that it is not action, but total renunciation of affinity for actions, which leads to salvation. Therefore, he should perform his duty of fighting, remaining detached from actions, in order to attain salvation, because it is not actions but it is attachment to them, which binds him. Gita 6:4. It is also easy for him to perform the duty of fighting, because it is his natural or innate duty, specific duty. The Lord, in the 14th verse of this chapter, declared, I have no desire for the fruit of actions. So actions do not bind me. He who knows me thus, is not bound by actions. It means that he who has learned the art of remaining detached from actions, while performing these and translates it into practice, gets liberated from the bondage of actions. The same fact has been pointed out by the Lord, in the 15th verse, when he declares, having known thus, the actions were performed by those ancient men, who sought liberation. In the 16th verse, he promised to explain the true nature of action and inaction, by knowing which, he would be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. In the present verse, he concludes the topic, by declaring that, having known thus, he will be liberated. It means that when a person performs his duty only for the welfare of the world without expecting any fruit, he is liberated from the bondage of actions. In the world, innumerable actions are performed, but a man is bound only by those with which he establishes his affinity. By having this affinity, he gets pleased or displeased, and thus he is bound by those actions. But when he renounces his affinity for the body and actions, he is liberated from the bondage of actions. Link. Having heard the description of sacrifice, a striver has a curiosity to know which one of the sacrifices is superior to the others. The Lord answers the question in the next verse. Knowledge, as a sacrifice, yajna, is superior to any material sacrifice. Zero harasser of the foes, Arjuna. All actions and objects in their entirety culminate in knowledge, jnana. 33. Sacrifices, which require material objects and actions, are called dravya maya. The suffix maya with the term dravya denotes large quantity. As with the preponderance of earth the earthen pot is called lfl1I, so with the preponderance of material the sacrifice is called material sacrifice. Knowledge as a sacrifice is superior to any material sacrifice, because in knowledge sacrifice, there is no need for material objects and actions. The Lord declares that all sacrifices are born of action, 432. But here he declares that all actions culminate in knowledge, i.e., knowledge as a sacrifice is not born of actions but is born of discrimination. Therefore, knowledge as a sacrifice, mentioned here, does not stand for knowledge as sacrifice, described in 428. It stands for the process of acquiring knowledge from teachers who are well versed in the scriptures, as will be described in the 34th verse. Material sacrifice, described here, stands for the 12 forms of sacrifice already described. Having performed material sacrifice, the knowledge sacrifice is offered. If we consider minutely, we come to know that knowledge sacrifice is also born of actions, but in knowledge sacrifice, there is predominance of discrimination. The terms sarvam and akalam, both are synonyms. Therefore, the expression sarvam karma should mean all actions, while the word akalam would stand for all material objects. So long as a man performs actions for himself, he has affinity for them, and consequently his mind remains impure. But, when he does not perform them for himself, his mind is purified. The mind is tainted by 3 kinds of defects: sins, volatility of mind, and ignorance. When a striver performs actions for the welfare of others without any selfish motive, his first 2 defects, i.e., sins and volatility of mind, come to an end. In order to get rid of the 3rd defect, having renounced actions, he goes to his preceptor, so that he may impart knowledge to him. At that time, He does not aim at actions and material objects, but his aim is God realization. This is known as culmination of all actions and material objects in knowledge, i.e., God realization through the attainment of true knowledge. A common method to attain knowledge in the scriptures. There are 8 inward spiritual means to attain knowledge. These are 1. Discrimination, 2. Dispassion, 3. Six traits: quietism, self-control, piety, indifference, endurance and composure. 4. Desire to attain salvation. 5. Listening to Vedantic texts. 6. Cognition. 7. Constant and deep meditation. 8. Self-realization. Discrimination, viveka, consists in distinguishing the real from the unreal. Renunciation of the unreal or having a disinclination for the world is called dispassion. Vairagya, deviation of the mind from the sense object is quietism. Sama, control over the senses is dhamma. Reverence for God and the scriptures is called piety. Shraddha, total resignation from the world, is apayurati. Forbearance in the pairs of opposites such as heat and cold, is endurance. Titiksa, freedom from doubt is composure. Samadhana, the desire for salvation, is called mumuksuta. When desire for salvation is aroused, a striver having renounced material objects and actions, goes to a learned God-realized preceptor. He hears the Vedantic texts, which remove his doubts, which is known as hearing, sravana. Then, he thinks of the reality, about God which is known cognition, manana. If he holds that the world is real and God does not exist, this is an opposite conception. Removal of this contrary conception is called constant and profound meditation. Nidhyasana. When, having renounced affinity for all material objects, one gets established in the self, it is called self-realization. Tattvam-padartha samsodhana. In fact, all these spiritual disciplines are practiced in order to renounce the affinity for the unreal. That which is renounced is not for one's own self, but the result of renunciation. God realization is for one's own self. Appendix and Dravyamaya Yajvaya, material sacrifice. There is predominance of material objects and actions, therefore those who hanker after worldly pleasures and prosperity hear the Vedantic texts, think over the sense objects, have a constant and profound meditation on riches and attain pains and sorrows. It is karanasapaksa, dependent on sense and other organs. In jnanayajna, knowledge sacrifice, there is predominance of discrimination. Therefore it is karananirapaksa, independent of sense and other organs. Therefore knowledge as sacrifice is superior to material sacrifice. In jnanayajna, affinity for all actions and objects is renounced, viz. After God realization nothing remains to be done, to be known and to be attained, because no other existence remains except God. Linkarjuna wants to attain self-realization. Therefore, the Lord, having described different methods as sacrifice for self-realization, now explains how to attain self-realization through the knowledge as sacrifice. Learn that by your obeisance, humble reverence, by questioning and by your service, the wise who have realized the truth will instruct thee in that knowledge. Anina 34. Comment. Tadvidi Arjuna, in the beginning declared, "I don't foresee any good by slaying my own people in the fight." Gita 131. And only sin will accrue to us if we kill these malignants. Gita 136. He also declared, "It is better to live in this world, even by begging, than to slay these honored teachers." Gita 2:5. Thus, according to Arjuna, it is better to renounce fighting, which is his duty, rather than to fight. But, according to Lord Krishna, it is not necessary to renounce actions in order to gain knowledge, wisdom. Gita 3124-15. Therefore, it seems that the Lord warns Arjuna that if he, because of his lack of faith in him, does not believe in what he preaches, he should go to a wise preceptor, who has realized the truth, and he would impart him the knowledge of self-realization, through the traditional practice of knowledge. The Lord further, in the 38th verse, declares, through the constant practice of the discipline of action, a striver without any other spiritual practice, attains the knowledge of the self. He needs no help from others. Prantpana. He should go to a teacher, with profound humility and perfect devotion, and through prostration surrender himself, his body and possessions etc., to him. He should be very submissive and very cautious, that in no way disrespect is meted out to a preceptor. He should keep his inquisitiveness always awake. Shavya, he should render service to his preceptor, with his body and objects, and try to please him, by carrying out his orders and acting according to his wish. A striver renders the greatest service to the saints, great souls, by translating their principles into practice, because their principles are more dear to them than even their bodies. They remain prepared to sacrifice their life in order to protect their principles. A striver should ask questions of his preceptor, with inquisitiveness, simplicity and humility, in order to know the reality about God, rather than to display his own learning or to put his preceptor on test. He should put such first of all, having performed his duty according to his caste and order of life scrupulously. A man having purified his mind should renounce the profaneness of actions. After that, having possessed the traits such as quietism and self-control etc., he should go to the God-realized preceptor in order to attain the knowledge of self-realization. In order to gain that knowledge, the inquisitive striver, having taken the fuel used in a sacrifice, with profound humility, should go to the God-realized preceptor who is well versed in the scriptures. Questions: Who am I? What is the world? What is the cause of bondage? What is salvation? How can I realize God? What are the obstacles to my spiritual practice? How to do away with these obstacles? Why am I unable to understand this topic of God realization? Thus, he should satisfy his curiosity and gain knowledge from his preceptor. The expression Tattva-darsana stands for the seers of truth, who have realized God, while the term Jnana stands for the wise, who are well versed in the Vedas and the scriptures. A striver should go to such a wise seer, and acquire knowledge from him. In regard to the purification of mind, there are three kinds of strivers, who are qualified to gain that knowledge: the superior, the mediocre and the inferior. The superior ones are those who attain knowledge of the self merely by listening to Vedantic texts. The mediocre ones attain this knowledge by hearing, cognition, constant and deep meditation. The inferior ones have several doubts. In order to clarify those doubts, it is necessary to possess knowledge of the Vedas and the scriptures. Without possessing knowledge, even such a preceptor who has realized the truth cannot clarify the doubts of his disciples. Similarly, even a learned preceptor, who has not realized the truth, cannot lead his disciple to self-realization. Therefore, a preceptor should be one who is wise and who has realized the truth. Upadexyanti tajnanam, by obeisance, by service and by asking questions with profound humility, a striver will be able to gain knowledge from the preceptor, as the latter is specially inspired to impart true knowledge in view of the disciple's profound humility and perfect devotion. It does not mean that a high-souled man expects these, but without humility and devotion, the striver will not be able to gain that knowledge. The superior ones are those who have a burning desire to realize the truth at once. Here, the term jnanam stands for truth realization, or self-realization. In fact, a striver does not gain knowledge about the self, but he gains it about the world. When a striver comes to know the truth about the unreal world, his affinity for the world is renounced and he realizes the self, which is self-evident. The term upadexyanti, instruct, means that the great souls instruct a striver, but it is not necessary that he should attain self-realization. The reason is that faith is a trait of the heart. A man may prostrate, question and serve hypocritically. Further, in the 39th verse, he declares, "The man who has faith gains knowledge, wisdom." Therefore, here it is mentioned that the wise will instruct him in that knowledge, while in the 39th verse, it is mentioned that a man who has faith gains knowledge. Link, having explained how to attain self-realization through knowledge, as sacrifice the Lord, in the next 35th, 36th and 37th verses, explains the real merit or glory of self-realization. Having known it, thou shalt not, 0 Arjuna, again get beguiled like this, and by that knowledge thou shalt see all beings, without exception, in yourself and then in me. 35 Comment: the Lord, in the preceding verse, said, "The wise will instruct thee in that knowledge." But, merely by listening, a man does not realize the self. The Lord declares, even after hearing, no one understands the self. Gita 2:29, because the self is beyond the access of mind and speech, etc. The self can be realized by the self when the striver attaches importance to discrimination. When he attaches importance to discrimination, ignorance totally perishes and discrimination changes into self-realization, and affinity is totally renounced for the insentient. Then one never gets deluded. In the first chapter of the Gita, Arjuna gets deluded when he believes that if his kinsmen are killed in the battle, no one will remain alive to offer them water and rice offering. So, they would go to hell. Moreover, it would be difficult for living women and children to earn their living in order to maintain their bodies. Having realized the self, a striver does not get deluded like this, because his affinity for the world is totally renounced. When he realizes the self, he sees all beings, infinite universes, in the self. As a person, having awakened from sleep, sees the entire creation of his dream in him, so does a striver, having realized the self, see all beings in the self. The same fact has been pointed out by the Lord in the 29th verse of the 6th chapter, when he declares, "A yogi sees all beings as assumed in the self." A Thomiya striver, having gained knowledge of the self by hearing, cognition, constant and deep meditation, etc., or from the preceptor, sees all beings in the self. This is the realization of Tvam, self-realization. Then he sees all beings in the self and God. This is realization of Tat, God realization. Thus, he realizes the identity of the self with God, and then nothing remains for him except God. The trio of the seer, the sight, and the seen gets extinct. When this trio gets lost, there remains no perceiver. Therefore, the expression, he perceives, refers to the feeling prevailing in the inner sense of that perfect soul. The sea and its waves may seem different, but both of these